Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Big news coming out of English rugby is the Saracens being automatically relegated, regardless of where they finish this season in the Premiership from the Premiership, basically, for the salary cap breaches. Now, we've already seen them being fined and docked points. And obviously, the fine was, in rugby terms, huge. It was £5.4 million. We've seen the chairman being replaced. We've now seen an independent commission be set up into rugby union's salary cap and how the game is governed. And we have seen one player decide to leave the club and move on at the end of the season, which is Liam Williams. So how does this affect England? How does this affect rugby union going forward? And how does this affect sport and sports governance? There's a whole lot of things to come out of this that will affect how not only rugby union is governed, not just here in the UK, but further afield, but sports transparency and governance. We know that the salary cap was being breached for a long period of time. We know that players were also actively involved in the breach. So if you want to look at a salary cap breach in the league before, look at the Melbourne Storm, Cameron Smith and Billy Slater with their third-party payments. Owen Farrell, the Vinopolas and others, Wigglesworth, at Saracens were doing exactly the same thing. So they were part of the problem, okay? So when people come out, oh, I feel sorry for the players, a significant members of the playing group were actually actively involved in the salary cap breach. We know that they're going to play in the Championship. We know that at the moment, the RFU have come out and stated that those players who currently play, who are eligible for selection for England, if they stay with Saracens next season, they will be eligible for selection for England going forward. They'll be playing a lower quality of rugby. And if they are to stay with Saracens, they're going to have to take a massive, massive, massive pay cut. The other issue is there's a salary cap in place, and most teams have already sorted out contracts for next season. The only teams that haven't are the teams chasing promotion from the Championship to the Premiership, with some, when they get promotion, if they do, there's only one team that goes up who they sign to join their squad. So it's going to be interesting to see how many of these players stay with Saracens and how many move to other English clubs and how many move abroad. At the moment, under RFU selection policy for the England national side, you have to be playing in England to play for the test side. So if they go to France, the Pro League, Major League Rugby, Super Rugby, they're eligible for selection for the test side as it currently stands. So the RFU need to look at their selection policy and go, is that causing part of the problem that we've had? Is the selection policy not allowing players to play in other leagues where they could earn more money? Is that part of the situation? Is that part of the problem? We've seen the issue with Welsh Rugby Union with the club game having financial problems. Again, a home-based selection policy where you can't play abroad unless you have a certain number of caps. Is the RFU going to have to look at itself, and the Welsh Rugby Union and other rugby unions have to look at themselves and go, should we allow a bit more of a free market when it comes to player movement? Other sports have it and don't constrain players by where they play for international selection. Why does rugby have to do this? Also, what I've seen online is the amount of ignorance from people when it comes to the salary cap system that we have. Now, I'm not an expert on the English rugby union salary cap system, but I know it's in place, and it has been in place for 20 years. Now, we have different types of salary cap. We have flexible, we have soft, we have hard. There's different types of salary cap. And what basically that means is all the clubs that are playing for that season in that particular league sign up to it. So Saracens have been signing up to the salary cap rules for 20 years. They've been breaching it for a minimum of 3, possibly longer. So they were signing up to a set of rules that they were actively breaking. Automatically, they deserve to be punished. Absolutely. So the situation is complex, but what's going to happen is this. There's going to have to be more transparency in the governance of the sport at club level. There's going to have to be more transparency in the governance of the sport at international level. There's going to have to be more transparency in how clubs are run. A whole variety of things. We're going to have to see a change of selection policy from the RFU. They're going to have to get rid of that home-based player rule. They're going to have to look at possibly changing how the salary cap works. A whole variety of things. There's going to be a lot of fallout from this. The fact that there's an independent commission now being set up to look at it is a big thing. Saracens are not the only club doing it. And there's calls to ring fence the Premiership. There are calls to scrap the salary cap as it currently is, change the way the broadcast rights work, a whole variety of things. But the players have to take some responsibility because they were actively involved in the salary cap breach. Not gonna lie. A lot of people have proven themselves to be very naive. Newcastle United's hopes of signing Christophe Piatek. Well, Well, the Newcastle United situation is interesting because obviously the club has still gone unsold. Mike Ashley has still not accepted an offer from a bidder. We've seen Amanda Staveley and Peter Kenyon have multiple bids now turned down. And the club has gone unsold. This is a situation that's been going on now for nearly 4 years. I remember when the channel first started, and the first major story I did was the tax avoidance and the tax investigation that Newcastle are involved in. That's still ongoing. People tend to forget about that. Just because the press aren't reporting an ongoing criminal investigation doesn't mean it's sort of gone away. It's still there. So the whole ownership question of Newcastle United and the fact that there's a criminal investigation into how the club is run and how the finances are sorted out, and the fact the club has gone unsold with multiple bids from high-profile people in the finance and football world who have experience of running sports teams, not being accepted by Mike Ashley says that he is overvaluing the club. So the fact that Christoph Piatek is not necessarily the highest class striker in the world shows the limitations of the transfer budget that is available to Newcastle United at this current time. I think Steve Bruce is doing a solid job considering the financial constraints that are in place and the fact the club has still gone unsold. I feel sorry for Rafa Benitez and how that was all handled. In fact, every manager to work for Mike Ashley has basically referred to him as a Mickey Mouse owner who is not necessarily working in the best interest of the club. The takeover thing, you keep asking about the takeover. Until something else gets released to the press, we have to assume that the offer has been rejected or any talks have collapsed because the club is still for sale. We know that. I could go with what have I got on the table? I've got £2.75. I've got £2.77 on my table down here. I could approach Mike Ashley. So I've got no debts. I have money. I have an income. I'm offering you this amount for the club. Now, he can accept or reject that offer, but I could offer him money for the club. The club turns a profit. Newcastle is a profitable club. It sells out games regularly. There's no problem with selling out that stadium. There's no problem with selling merchandise to the fans. No problem there. The club makes money. It's a profitable club. The issue is the fact that the uncertain ownership is a problem for other potential investors. This ongoing tax fraud investigation is a problem. Because while it's not being reported in the press, that doesn't mean it's gone away. Just because it's a foreign investigation led by the French authorities, it doesn't mean it's gone away. And it does also involve football agents. And this is something else that is being hotly discussed at the moment in a lot of circles, is the role of agents in not just football, but in professional sports. And the fact that sports salaries are rising faster than ever before. And considering that the average Joe, the average Jane Doe or John Doe in the street, the average man and woman, family, average person, their wages over the last 10, 12 years have stagnated or contracted. Sports stars' wages and the salaries have gone up by hundreds of percent. And agents are a big part of that. And you're discussing a transfer, signing a player. The agents are a big reason why transfers are overinflated. The agents' fees, the lack of transparency. And that's part of this tax fraud investigation. Big part of it. And it's not just a football problem in Europe. It's a sports problem. There's a lack of transparency of sports agencies and independent player agents. You can have a sports agency that could have multiple sports stars from multiple sports on their books, and they could be a big company. Because not only do they sort out the contracts for the players, saying this guy's going to get a signing on bonus, a clean sheet bonus, a performance bonus, appearance bonus, all this, his standard salary. But they also get an agent's fee. And then they can also sign the contracts for all the commercial advertising they do. So Joe Hart with his Head and Shoulders adverts back in the day, and now you've got Kyle Walker and basically Man City and Tottenham players doing all these adverts, like Harry Kane and all that. That's part of what the agent will sort out, will be their commercial obligations. These are not transparent agreements. Not transparent at all. Ben Stokes had an agreement with New Balance for like £300,000 extra a year just to be sponsored by them, to do adverts. He's now got sponsorship by Red Bull. They get paid a lot of money on top of their salaries. This is why a salary cap in certain sports doesn't work, because that's a third-party payment that will be banned on a certain salary caps. So agents and how they work is a very unregulated international industry. Sports agents, commercial representatives, they're very underregulated, very untransparent, very closed and secretive, and that does actually affect how much players get paid. A lot of these transfers you see, these mega transfers, the agents take a massive fee, a percentage, silly amounts of money, and there's a lot of dodgy dealings going on with player agents. Lots of dodgy dealings, and it's something that sports authorities have been very lax with, and a lot of industries have to be highly regulated, and the sports agents, they're not highly regulated at all. They can get away with murder. They can do a lot of stuff that in other industries and businesses you wouldn't be able to get away with. This is why the hopes of Newcastle United signing this player hinge on the fact that the player's agent wants a huge sum of money. He wants to get paid. Some of these player agents can do one transfer and never have to work ever again. It's a very lucrative business because the player is technically, you're representing them, but they're also employing you to represent them. So you're there with all the contract signings for adverts and sponsorships, and that agent will get a cut of that fee. And sometimes these agents are mugging off these players and taking more money than they should. So this is a big issue with pro sports. Football is, I think, one of the sports blighted by it. Absolutely. But other sports also, it's a big thing. Right. Other things we've been discussing. So the Saracens story is the big one. To be honest, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more movement in the transfer market making big waves. There's not any massive signings taking place this January that are massive. I mean, Ashley Young at Inter Milan, he's never been a great player personally. From Ashley Young going from Man United to Inter Milan, it's not really a massive transfer in the big scheme of things. But he's gone, and Harry Maguire is now the Man United captain. I think Leicester are laughing all the way to the bank with that transfer. I think Harry Maguire's made a massive mistake. I think he's not worth 80 million. This is, again, player agents. Leicester said, we're not selling for less than this amount of money. And they overvalued him. And Man United were like, all right, we'll pay your valuation. Leicester are like, you're joking. Man United are like, hold my beer. No, we're giving you the money. Leicester are like, he's worth about £5, right? Okay, we'll take that. So Ed Woodward and his running of Manchester United with the Glazers is another thing. How football's run and the lack of transparency and the amount of debt. People go, oh, football, it's full of money. Yeah, it's also full of debt as well. Lots of unstructured debt. If you take away some of these wealthy owners and the clubs stand by themselves, they're bankrupt. They're bust. We'll have another Bury on our hands with the big club. And it's a matter of time before one of these big clubs actually fails, when an owner decides to pull the plug and they're standalone companies and they're laced with debt and they just can't cope and they collapse. We'll have another Portsmouth. We'll have another Bolton. It's a matter of time. It will happen. The football money bubble will burst. And the fact that we're seeing less movement in the transfer market this year than in the Neymar transfer says to me that the money bubble's starting to, shrink. It will implode eventually. Another thing of note is UEFA want to expand the Champions League, and that's the thing. Was there ever a football equivalent to the Saracens situation? There isn't a salary cap in professional football or soccer. Juventus was a match-fixing scandal that doesn't just involve Juventus, it involved multiple clubs. The Saracens situation, I would say the only comparable salary cap breach is the Melbourne Storm in the NRL about a decade ago. That is the only comparable breach with third-party payments to players. The Juventus situation was to do with bribing officials and referees and teams fixing games. And that involved multiple clubs in multiple leagues in Italian football. So the Calopoli scandal of 2005-2006 is completely different because it had multiple teams involved. It was match fixing rather than salary cap breaching or circumventing league rules, although match fixing is obviously illegal because it links to organised crime. Clubs have gone bust because of it, like Siena, they don't exist anymore. So Antonio Conte's former team that he used to coach, they don't exist anymore. They've gone out of business. Other clubs like Parma are really struggling. Some clubs like, I think, was it Lecce or Regina or wherever it is, are struggling. AC Milan never fully recovered. Juventus, they spent some time out of the league, and so Inter basically dominated the league for a lengthy period of time. The Italian football Serie A league is still struggling now, 13 years later. Still struggling now. The fallout from that has been huge, but it's not the first match fixing scandal. I wouldn't call that a comparable situation. I would say it's a similar situation where a club's been thrown out of a league, yes, but it's for different reasons. I think the closest you can get to a Saracen situation is the Melbourne Storm in the NRL. The difference in the NRL is there's no promotion relegation, but that is, I think, the closest sporting scandal of a salary cap breach you're going to get. The Astros in Major League Baseball, where they're mic'd up, that is different again. That's a different type of scandal. What will the fallout from that be? I will have to do a Major League Baseball video on that, a separate standalone video where I'm going to have to do the research, possibly later today, possibly tomorrow, possibly in the week, get the whiteboard out and do a lot of notes. So the Major League Baseball cheating scandal is, again, different. Then you have to look at a lot of other sporting scandals. The Juventus Calciopoli, or whatever you want to pronounce it, the match-fixing scandal involved more than one club. They were the most punished. The difference is they were stripped of their titles, whereas Saracens are allowed to keep their titles, and that's the difference. Plus, the amount of money involved is massively different. So the closest comparable I think you'll get to a Saracen situation is Melbourne Storm with the third-party payments. That's the closest you'll get. The difference is the Melbourne Storm were also stripped of their titles. And I've done videos on the NRL looking at club histories. And I can look at the Melbourne Storm salary cap scandal. I can look at all the NRL salaries cap scandals if you really want. And I can go through each one. There have been multiple. The latest was the Sea Eagles, the Manly Sea Eagles. We've had Parramatta. It did affect Juventus for a long time. It may not have affected them recently because they've now recovered. But at the initial early stages, they were relegated. Some players decided to stay on, some players left, and Inter dominated the Italian league for a while. Now Juventus are back dominating again, but there was a long period of time where they didn't. So it took a while for Juventus to get back to the top table. And there's still impacts on the Italian game. There's still things coming out about links to the mafia. I mean, Fabrizio Micheli has been sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for links to the mafia last week. There is still a massive fallout from the corruption of Italian football, dating back to the pre-Calciopoli, but also crowd numbers are down, the quality of football is down. The Italian league hasn't recovered. It's not just Juventus, it's AC Milan, it's Regina. They haven't recovered. Lazio were involved. There were clubs in Serie C that were involved as well. So there's a whole lot of clubs that have been affected. It goes past just Juventus. They were the most harshly punished, but there's a bit more than that. Oh, the Maple Leafs. I don't do sports betting. Okay, I don't do it. I know people who do, and obviously now in North America, gambling is legal in every single one of the US states. As of I think last year or the year before, they've completely liberalized it, legalized it, and regulated it. I would never bet on a sports team. I used to. I don't anymore. I used to bet on the horses and occasionally have one-off bets on the football and the rugby and things like that. I don't anymore. What frustrates me is I like watching things on YouTube. There's a couple of non-sporting channels that I watch on YouTube. One of them is a gaming channel. One of them is a metal detecting treasure hunting channel, right? The amount of betting ads and sports betting ads that come up, and I'm like, how do I get rid of these? I keep telling YouTube, I don't want to see this type of ad. I keep telling them repeatedly. And I keep telling them this, and they keep bombarding you with these Bet 365, Bet AAA, and all this elaborate. So I'm like, this is a metal detecting video by an amateur archaeologist. Why is there a betting ad on his channel? This is a gamer. I would expect a video game advert, an esports advert, a laptop advert, buy this new gaming Asus or whatever. No, betting ads. It frustrates me. So that's why I'm concerned with sports betting companies or betting firms sponsoring sporting events. And that is a concern for a lot of people with the liberalization. The house doesn't always win in casinos. They don't always win. They have to. There is a win percentage where you can walk away. If you're a professional gambler, you can beat the house. I used to be a professional poker player. Trust me, you can walk away with the money. The thing is, it relies on the small bets and lots of people placing small bets on the fruit machines, on the roulette wheel, and losing. That's where the big professional gamblers who can card read, who can work out slot machines, they make the money. But they actually make less money than the casino makes. That's why the casinos aren't a scam necessarily, but it relies on 95% of the customers losing 95% of the time. When you go to a casino and you go in with $100, you expect to walk away with about $10. Okay, or you walk into a casino and you're walking with £100, you're probably going to walk out with about 15. They are there to make money off you, but occasionally, one time out of 10, someone walks in with £100 and walks out with 1,000. So 1 in 10 people win in casinos. It's not all a scam, but they want to keep you coming back to spend your money in there. This is how professional gamblers work. Only the very, very best, walk out with a profit. I'm quite good at reading odds and reading cards and looking at the form book of sports betting, but I don't bet anymore. I can be a very good professional gambler. I choose not to because it's an addictive thing. And as someone who's battled addiction with substance abuse, I don't want to become a gambling addict as well. I have some friends who have gone down that road of spending hundreds, if not thousands of pounds a day gambling. And a cheeky bet every weekend is still a gambling addiction because you're doing it on a regular, frequent basis, weekly. So that is bad. Tip is walk away. If you can't walk away from something in 60 seconds, don't walk into it. If you can't walk away within a minute, don't walk into it. If you can't walk away, don't walk into it. That's my personal opinion. I've got nothing against gambling. There's no risk, no reward. But I think there needs to be a limit on how much you can bet, and what the losses can be and what the odds can be. We have regulated gambling in this country. A lot of jurisdictions do have regulated gambling laws, and there's always a battle between the gambling firms and the authorities. But here's the thing: the authorities can tax the gambling firms, and it's a good tax revenue for the authorities. When it was illegal, that's why it was illegal. Is the people were gambling and it was illegal, and the governments weren't making any tax revenue. I don't think we should make it illegal. I think we have to get the regulation right. I think the pressure groups don't quite realise the economic impact of those who will lose their jobs. A lot of gambling firms are based in this country, even though they're international. They're based in this country. They employ a lot of people. They have done some good stuff, like the National Lottery, for example. That is done a lot of good things for sport in the sense that you buy a lottery ticket, and it's the type of gambling I don't mind because it's not as expensive as you think. You just put it down on your shopping list, £1, £2.50, whatever. You might do a monthly ticket. It's not as going into a casino or a slot machine daily. I occasionally buy a lottery ticket. Okay, I occasionally do the Euro Millions because occasionally but it's not an everyday thing. Sort of like, I've got paid. I've done my overtime. I've got a little bit extra money in my pocket. I might do a lottery ticket. The National Lottery has pumped hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds into sporting projects and charity projects in this country, educational projects. That lotteries generally have some kind of state regulation behind them, or council regulation. There's lots of lotteries now. You've got the health lottery, you've got the postcode lottery. There's a few new lotteries that have been set up. They are very strictly governed about the price of the ticket and the minimum and maximum prize pots. They're very strictly governed about the rules they've got to follow and the odds they've got to give on a win out. And they're very, very strictly governed. And it's another way to make tax revenue because very few people win on that. Very, very few people win on that. The odds of winning the lottery are millions to one, and the tax revenue that the government gets outweighs the payouts when someone does actually win a lottery. Lotteries are a good way for a government to quickly raise tax revenues very, very quickly, or an independent organisation to raise revenues very, very quickly if they're assisting. A lot of lotteries have been done to cover government debts in the past. And historically, this is a very interesting one. Casanova, Giacomo Casanova, very famous lover of men and women. So when someone's called a Casanova, they're a bit of a Lothario. But he actually, one of his jobs that he did was going around Europe setting up state lotteries for governments who were short of cash. So rich people would back this lottery, and then people would buy a ticket in the hope of winning. And very people obviously won the payout, and the governments made lots of money out of the revenues because it was state sanctioned. That's how lotteries work. I have nothing wrong with, let's say, things like the National Lottery, which because they do a lot of good in society with the projects, the Health Lottery with the projects, the Postcode Lottery, they do lots of charity projects, they do lots of, they pump a lot of their revenues back into the community. Where I have issues is with the betting machines, sports betting, where it's compulsive gambling, where they don't say, mate, stop, you need to get help. The amount of celebrities endorsing gambling firms, like Betfair, BetDAC, Ladbrokes. I don't care if I name drop. I don't care if I get done for breach of copyright. I'm name dropping these things. That's where I concern. I don't think we should make it gambling illegal, but I think we need to look very, very closely at sports and betting sponsorship very, very closely. And the advertising, and the government is sort of putting pressure on the gambling firms and the leagues to look at how. I mean, the FA got done for having FA Cup games streamed via gambling firms, 7 gambling firms, and what they tried to do was to get you sign up to their gambling firm, and they might give you a free bet or some money off a bet or whatever, guaranteed odds, all this bullshit, and the FA signed up to an agreement through a third-party company that sold the rights. This is the concern about the TV rights, because Sky and BT didn't buy all the TV rights package. There are a lot of games floating around, and I'm not a big fan. Sporting and gambling, they do go hand in hand. Horse racing is the only sport, I believe, or one of the few. Horse racing and dog racing are 2 of the sports that are ring fenced, where the gambling money does actually support the sport. You very rarely get a winner, in the sense that 9 times out of 10, if there's a field of 9 horses, only one's going to win, and a couple will be each way. So in reality, the gambling firms make a profit. It's when the favourite wins, where everyone's backed it, that they pay out and they make a loss. Generally speaking, horse racing, especially things like the Grand National, the bookmakers, the betting firms make a lot of money. The concern of that I have, and I'll talk about the Maple Leafs in a minute, with being the Barcelona of the hockey world, because they're not. They haven't won the Stanley Cup since 1967. They're really not the Barcelona of the hockey world. They can't win a Stanley Cup and haven't done for 53 years. Sport and gambling have gone hand in hand for a very, 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 very long time. The regulation of sporting and the decriminalisation of gambling was partly to gain tax revenue and partly to take it out of the hands of organised criminals. Yes, gambling's always been a taboo subject in certain instances. There used to be a thing called debtor's prison. Many famous members of the aristocracy, for example, and the ruling middle classes have had gambling addictions. It's a very well-known fact. You just have to look in the history books and look on Wikipedia, and you'll find many a famous person, historical figure from the past, having a gambling problem and gambling debts. But sports and gambling have been going hand in hand for a very, very long time. The organised crime element has been there for a very, very long time, and it's taken until, I think, 2018, I think it was 2018, the US government decided to legalise gambling in all states, because it was up to city jurisdiction, and federal law now states it's completely legal across the whole 50 states, plus US dependencies abroad. It's taken that long for the US to re-legalise gambling nationwide. It was legal, I think, until... because if you look in the old westerns, if you watch the old westerns and you read books about the Wild West and the history of expansion westwards, every bar or hotel would have a poker table. So gambling was legal in the US in the 1870s. There was obviously a period of time where they decided to make it illegal alongside alcohol with prohibition. There was a period of time where the US federal government decided, we're not making enough money tax-wise off this, or it's tax exempt. We're going to make it illegal. We're not making any money, blah, 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 blah. And it's only Vegas and Nevada to encourage settlement in that state. They allowed it. Right. Okay. Talking about ice hockey, the Maple Leafs are the second most successful team of all time when it comes to the NHL, after the Montreal Canadiens. They haven't won the Stanley Cup since 1967. The Montreal Canadiens haven't won the Stanley Cup since 1993. The Pittsburgh Penguins, you could say, are the current Barcelona in a sense. They're the last team to win back-to-back Stanley Cups. But then you've got the Washington Capitals and the St. Louis Blues, who won the last 2 between them. The Red Wings are one of the worst teams in the league right now. They were the most consistent team of the 90s and the 2000s. I think they had 25 consecutive playoff appearances. I believe 25 consecutive seasons in the playoffs. They have made the playoffs for, I think, 3 years now. They are, at the moment, currently the worst team in the NHL. They can barely win a game. I don't think you can compare an NHL team to Barcelona or Real Madrid or Man United at their peak. I don't think you can. I think the sport's different. I think you look at the history of the sport, the Montreal Canadiens are the most successful team of all time, haven't won since 1993. The Maple Leafs, second most successful team of all time, haven't won since 1967. So the two most successful teams in NHL history haven't won for a generation or more, or in the Maple Leafs case, 2 generations. The St. Louis Blues, it took them 53 years to win their first trophy, or 52 years to win their first Stanley Cup in their 4th attempt at the final. The Washington Capitals were crap for many years. Their second Stanley Cup final appearance, they finally win the Stanley Cup. Liverpool have actually had the most points in the top division. So if you count the Premier League and the old Division 1, Liverpool actually are the most successful team. Surprisingly, Everton and Aston Villa have more points than Manchester United as well in the top division, historically. Manchester United, for a very, very long time, were not a very good team. It was only in the 60s with Busby and in the 80s to the 2000s, mid-2000s with Sir Alex Ferguson that they won trophies. Red Wings are, at the moment, yes, a bit like Norwich City. Liverpool haven't won the Premier League, but they've still won trophies in the Premier League era, just because their league form has dropped. They've never been relegated from the Premier League. They've never actually been relegated from the top division. Neither have Everton. They're 2 teams never to have been outside the top flight, ever. Man United have been relegated numerous times. Man United have been in the 2nd division. Aston Villa have been in the 2nd division before. And Aston Villa are a more successful club than Man United for points obtained in the top division. So, Dennis Law has, that's a very famous thing. He went across the city. What sports do I follow? Do I follow the NRL? Yes, I do. If you look at my NRL playlist, you'll see there's many videos there. I followed most of last season, keeping track of the scores and the table, although there were weeks where I didn't, keep up to date for work reasons when I was busy with work, but I do follow the NRL. I do follow the AFL, although not religiously. I will dip in and out of games and have a little watch. Obviously, I follow multiple sports: NHL, rugby union, rugby league, you name it, I follow it. I would say if you're looking at Liverpool's history, their most successful period was the late 60s to the late 80s. The fact that in the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s, they have won trophies, yes, and Champions Leagues and FA Cups and League Cups, they've still won trophies. They still have a trophy cabinet. And Man United have actually won less trophies. Liverpool are more successful as an English team. Dennis Law, I think it wasn't as successful at Man City, but he still won stuff with Man City. He just wasn't as successful. He had most of his success with Manchester United. Which NRL team do I follow? The Canberra Raiders. I like the Viking clap. I'm a Raiders fan. Liverpool Man United today is not what it was in the sense that Man United are a shadow of the team that they were under Ferguson. But people forget that Ferguson didn't win anything for years. They nearly fired him multiple times in his first couple of seasons. He was on the chopping block regularly. And this is what people forget is I don't think Man United are the same as Liverpool were Liverpool in 2011 were facing relegation, historically bad. Manchester United, they're still a top flight club in the top 6. They're still in a European place. They're still in the FA Cup. They're not as bad as people think they are. Man United fans have got so used to winning all the time, they don't know what actually having a tough time is. They're all glory hunters, really. They are all glory hunters. I obviously support soccer, but I call it football. Obviously, you call footy Aussie rules, but I don't play Ultimate Team. I don't really follow European football as closely as I used to. I've fallen out of love with soccer, football, association football over the last couple of years. I don't enjoy it as much. There's a lot of negativity around the sport. There's a lot of scandal in the sport that has severely damaged the sport's reputation. And some of the salaries are obscene. I think some of the players are getting paid far, far too much. for doing far, far too little, really. All right, you make NRL FUT card. Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, I think the NRL is a fun competition. I think it's better than Super League. I think the NRL does need to make some improvements. I do think the NRL needs to look at possibly going to Perth and another team in New Zealand, possibly trying to try Adelaide again with a bit more investment. But there's a whole lot of things that we could discuss about the NRL and Super League in a separate later on in the video. I don't necessarily. I think looking at it, it'll be refreshing to have a new name on the Premier League trophy. If we're talking about Liverpool, I'm trying to answer questions out of order here. If Liverpool were to get the name on the Premier League trophy, that would be a refreshing new name on the trophy, and only the 7th club to do it. So that would be refreshing to see with an English captain, which is always refreshing as well. But I think they've won so many trophies, it'd be refreshing to see a team that has never won a trophy before, for example, sneaking up and winning. That would be kind of nice, because you look at the clubs that have won the Premier League, there's only been 2 one-time winners, and then other teams have won it multiple times, and it's only a select group of clubs that have ever lifted that trophy. So it's a very small selection who've won since 1992. So has the Premier League helped English football or hindered it? There you go. Watched your video earlier. Interesting. Oh no, Saracens really are in trouble. The only comparable salary cap breach, and people have asked me about this, and I have. The Saracens situation, and I'm going to go through this. I opened the live stream with it. The issue is Saracens were breaching the cap for years. This was being leaked slowly to the media over the last couple of years. We were aware of there was allegations of salary cap breaches that may affect the team. This was in the build-up to the World Cup. Saracens are hit with a point deduction and a fine after the World Cup. Very, very suspicious timing by the RFU there to go, well, we'll wait until the World Cup's done. So they're hit with a £5.4 million fine, which I think equivalates to about 8 million Australian dollars, or about 6.5–7 million US, something like that. So they get hit with a sizable fine and a 35-point deduction. So 35 points, they're on minus 35 points, which means they went from mid-table to the bottom of the league. So Leicester are off the bottom. They were told to get cap compliant. Right? So they were told to get cap compliant. They didn't. Only Liam Williams was the only player announced as moving on from the club at the end of the season with, moving on. That means Farrell, the Vunipolas, Itoje, Wigglesworth, Cruz, all that are all still Saracens contracted players on the same salaries and wages they were before. Now, the wheels turned very quickly the last couple of days. So Friday, we heard rumours that they might be getting relegated and there may be further punishment for the club. Yesterday evening, very late on in the evening, they were told, it doesn't matter where you finish in the league, you're getting thrown out. You're getting relegated. This morning, the aftermath is such that I have very little sympathy, because players were actively involved in the third-party payments. This is why I say, if you're talking about a salary cap breach, look at the Melbourne Storm with Cameron Smith and Billy Slater receiving third-party payments in brown envelopes. The players who were involved were fully aware of what they were doing. A lot of fans online are going, we've got to feel for the players. No, they were actively involved in doing what they were doing. What the fallout from this is going to be, the RFU are going to have to look at their international selection policy. So, if you only play in England, you can get selected for the national side. If you play outside England, you can't get selected. That's part of the problem. This is part of the problem Wales are having with their domestic clubs in the Pro League being basically broke, is they can't afford to pay these players. I think post this season, so after the Six Nations is done, it's going to be interesting to see how many of the players actually decide to stay with Saracens, because they can't afford to keep them in the Championship. Other clubs in the Championship will refuse to play against Saracens. They will say, well, hang on a second, we are having to pay players a lot less. We can't compete financially. They have got international tier 1 level players in their team. Where do the players go? Can other clubs in England take on these players or some of the players? It's a difficult one. It is a difficult one. What's going to happen? We need more transparency. I've discussed that. Far more transparency is required, I believe, in sports governance globally, not just the RFU. I think globally. This shows that rugby is going the same way as football, and player agents clearly have a part to play in this as well, because they would help them sign up all these contracts. The player agents go, the person employing me, my client wants X amount. Negotiate with us. Saracens obviously realised that in order to keep their players from going to France, domestically at least, they were going to have to find a way to pay them more. The thing is, the Saracens players dominate the England team, yet they're not the only good side in the league. Exeter are pretty good, Northampton Saints, and the Chiefs have done it, been a solid side as well without salary cap breaches. What I find interesting is Saracens haven't been stripped of their titles, and the amount of ignorance online from armchair warriors, as I call them, and the so-called armchair experts. The European Cup, they should keep that because that doesn't involve the salary cap. Well, actually, every team that signs up for the European Cup plays in a salary cap controlled league. All the teams agree to the league rules when they sign up. So even the French top 14, there's a salary cap. Yes, it's much higher than England's, but there's still a salary cap, and those clubs have to comply with French league rules. The fact that they can pay twice as much is irrelevant and moot point. They still have to comply with rules. The issue I think we there have is the RFU have got to look at their international selection rules for England and change them. They've been cheating for years, at least minimum 3 years, if not before. Other clubs have clearly circumvented the cap as well in the 20-year period that the salary cap has been in place. I have no doubt on that. They've just been a bit more subtle and maybe not breached it as badly, so to speak. I mean, we could assume Leicester have been breached the cap for a long time. The issue is that Saracens got caught. Saracens got caught badly. And the other issue is all the clubs every season, at the beginning of the season, the promoted club to the league and the clubs that were in the league before all sign up to the salary cap rules every season. They regularly review the salary cap every season, and all the clubs sign up before the season kicks off. We are happy with what's in place. That's basically what is put forward. Well, of course you're going to prefer Super League because you're a Leeds Rhinos fan. It's kind of obvious. If you were, let's say, a fan of an NRL club, you would prefer the NRL. I prefer the NRL. I think it's a better competition. The fact that Sonny Bill Williams is one of big superstars coming to Super League this year is a great thing. It might close the gap, but we will see what happens when Super League kicks off in a few weeks' time. But yeah, Saracens did it to themselves. Absolutely. The players were fully aware of what they were doing because they were part of the salary cap breach, because they wanted to play for England, because they could get paid more money in France, and they chose to, obviously, they wanted to play Test rugby. And this is where the RFU needs to look at their selection policy and go, this is a bad idea. We're actually harming the game because players should have free movement to play where they want. This is part of the problem. The RFL are finding this out with their, you have to pay to enter the Challenge Cup if you're a non-English team, and that backfired. So both codes of rugby have money issues and governance issues. This is going to have to, they're going to have to change how the game is governed, not just in England, but across the board, because in the Pro League, the Welsh game is a mess. Now the Saracens scandal, that's a mess. It makes me wonder how Wales and England have been so solid as national sides, considering that the domestic game is scandal, financial scandal and mess and mismanagement and criminality, it looks like, with Saracens. That's how I wonder how these players, knowing that this investigation is going on, or the Welsh players not knowing if they have clubs to go to post-World Cup, how they managed to focus on doing what they did and playing as well as they have for so long. That's what stuns me. The Super Rugby is a financial mess. The whole professional rugby has been badly governed for a long time, and World Rugby are coming up with these harebrained, crack-brained schemes that they tried to change the international format and the structures. I don't know. So rugby union has been badly governed and financially is a mess. Rugby league doesn't have any money, and again, I think has problems, massive problems. And if you look at it, rugby league doesn't want to expand in the south of England as much as it should. I think that's a great opportunity there. It's where all the money is in England, but they're just determined to be protectionist, and it's backfiring on. Look at the Lions tour to New Zealand, Tonga, and PNG. Absolute shambles, reliant on basically Australians and Kiwis who've got tenuous links to the UK, who've never actually lived in the UK at all, spent any time here apart from maybe playing at the odd season. Sign them up, fell apart. The NRL regular salary cap breaches, although, and it happens yearly, and some of the breaches are a few $1,000s here or there. And of course, Melbourne Storm, Canterbury Bulldogs, Parramatta Eels, Manly Sea Eagles, massive breaches. I think that's where I think there's a problem. Lack of money. How do I think Toronto? Moving on to the Super League. How do I think Toronto will do? I think, and in relation to your comment on where Sonny Bill Williams should play, I think because he's played as a back in rugby union for so long, I would have him in the back line. His salary is the big cause of concern because of the lack of money in rugby league. I know Toronto got a wealthy benefactor, and that is fair enough. But where do you play him? They decided to pencil him in primarily as a second row forward, which is his preferred rugby league position. I get that. But imagine having him as a left centre. That would be devastating. I don't think a Super League defence could shut him down. And especially if he plays for 80 minutes, that's going to really be a head scratch about how you stop him. I still think the NRL is the better competition. I totally agree with Taryn. I think, yeah, it is. World Club Challenge recent years has been a very one-way street. And what gets me is the Super League clubs have already started the regular season. They're already up to speed, whereas the NRL was still in pre-season at this point. So that tells you something about the professionalism, the fitness levels, the quality level. I think the NRL is the better competition for now, although we're starting to see big name stars go from NRL to Super League. Admittedly, all the players that have just come over are later in their careers as well. I think that's going to be interesting. But we'll see what happens. Do the Roosters regularly rort the cap? Probably. Every club does at some point, apart from the Gold Coast Titans, because they are hopeless and have no money. Just putting it out there. I think what we've seen with the NRL salary cap and the scandal that the NRL has had and the negative publicity, this is why AFL in Australia is the most followed competition, has better crowds, better participation at youth level. And for all the Melbourne Storm success, salary cap or otherwise, in the state of Victoria, not many schools have signed up for rugby league or rugby union for that matter with Melbourne Rebels. AFL, Aussie rules, is played religiously in Victoria. It's an Aussie rules state. We knew that, but there doesn't seem to be any pathway, for rugby league. Western Australia has more registered players than the state of Victoria for rugby league in the local state competition. This is why I think Perth is a perfect location for an NRL team. What do I think of St Helens this season? I think the Super League is going to be interesting with some of the big name players that are coming over from the NRL and obviously players retiring at certain clubs. It's going to be fun. Toronto's a new team and Sonny Bill Williams playing Super League. I thought it would go to the NRL personally, but the salary cap being what it is and Toronto having the money, it's no surprise he's gone where the money is. He wants to get paid. He knows his career is not long left. He wants to get a paycheck, obviously, because he wants to retire at some point and have a decent retirement. He's not only a league legend, he's a union legend, and he's a boxing legend. Sonny Bill Williams is an ultimate athlete. He obviously wants to hang up his boots at some point, and he wants to get paid. Now, he's luckily been largely injury-free throughout his career, so he might have a good 6 years left him in. Do you think they should invest their money in some youth? I do believe if you are going to grow the game in a new market, you have to get young kids playing. That is down to the governing bodies. That's down to rugby league, be it the NRL or Super League, the RFL, the National Rugby League Commission in Australia, the National Rugby League, coming together as bodies and pooling the resources globally into developing the new markets like Greece, like Jamaica, like Canada, these nations that are qualifying for the World Cup for the first time, these nations where they're now getting new professional teams. That's where they need to go out to the high schools and the secondary schools and the middle schools and the local communities, set up grassroots clubs, and interact with the communities, grow a fan base, grow a playing base, and get locals involved rather than just getting some expat, colonial who's come over and gained residency rights. That's basically what the US national team is Samoans who've got residency or Kiwis or Aussies who've got residency, who've played a bit of league. This is the problem. You want to get locals playing it. And that's where Sonny Bill Williams could have that effect with encouraging people to want to set up a local rugby league club, get involved. When you get a big superstar like that who does have a global selling package, that's where you can actually grow a game. David Beckham going to the MLS saved the MLS. That's why soccer or football in the US, the MLS has grown massively and crowds are good. The national side is struggling at the moment, but more kids are playing, more fans are watching, and the league is growing again. You get a superstar player in that sport who is a global brand, more than just a regional brand, a global brand, and you whack him in a location or her. Watch the sport grow. I think part of the problem with issues with crowd numbers is the TV. A lot of free-to-air TV has been taken away from league and union. The very little club rugby is shown on free-to-air TV. It's mostly predominantly on Sky or BT, which is a problem. The TV money hasn't actually helped the game as promised, and from what I've seen with Aussie NRL crowds, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're really bad. It does depend on the team and where they are doing. Brisbane didn't draw as well this last season, partly because the team was really, really poor, but also the Suncorp Stadium has capacity rules for certain times of the year. Other teams drew really well. Melbourne Storm never sell out their stadium. No, the Challenge Cup knockout stages, not the knockout stages, but the later rounds when the Super League teams join are on the telly. I think they should have every round on the telly, like the FA Cup. The Roosters, for any team that plays in Sydney, because you've got the rebuilding of one of the stadiums, they all ground share. I think they should have their own suburban grounds. I think that's where the NRL made a mistake trying to copy AFL. Have your own style, have your own method. I think that's where it went wrong. And when you're looking at ANZ Stadium being like half empty for a Roosters Rabbitohs clash, or a Canterbury Bulldogs Rabbitohs clash or Roosters clash, or the SCG at the moment because of the restructuring of ANZ, or whatever, the big stadiums in Sydney, the old Olympic Stadium, for example, that they use. And it's basically half empty. That doesn't look great for television, not gonna lie. The fact that Parramatta and West Tigers now have West Bank, and that is a great facility, and Parramatta can basically sell it out, is brilliant to see. It's a lovely facility from what I've seen and what I've gathered. And they used to sell out the old Parramatta Persec Stadium anyway. I think they should go back to having Canterbury, the Roosters, and the Rabbitohs in suburban grounds. It works better because, the crowd sizes are smaller, but the stadium's smaller, so there's less empty seats, and it has a better atmosphere. It looks better for TV. It sells a healthy product. Empty seats make a product look unhealthy, even though I do believe some teams draw really, really well. I know Canberra, the Raiders, do really well. They've had some good crowd numbers. Admittedly, the Geo Stadium is crumbling and is ancient and is not great. They do quite well. But you have to look at a variety of reasons why teams are struggling to draw, why crowd numbers aren't great. We saw in the World Cup a couple of years ago in Rugby League that when the South Sea Island teams were playing and Papua New Guinea, the crowd numbers were great. But it is what it is. There has to be reasons why AFL does better. Is it marketing? Is it ticket pricing? Is it the deals they have, corporation sponsorship, a whole variety of things? Is it the TV revenue? You have to look at why people are staying away. It's the product on the field. There's a whole lot of questions you have to ask why crowd numbers aren't doing as great as what they were before the Super League was. You have to ask the question. Is it because of Murdoch? There you go. Yeah. Ticket price, I think. Major League Baseball, there's a lot of games in Major League Baseball where there's hardly anyone there, but when you're playing 162 games or 81 games, home games a season, you're going to make your money. I think the AFL does better because, it's a more national competition where you have more teams outside the East Coast, in Perth, in Adelaide. I'm surprised they haven't put a team in Tas. I've done a video on where the AFL put a team in Tas. You're more than welcome to watch it and share it in the AFL playlist. It's possibly because of the population side of Tasmania, but a lot of players come from Tassie. A lot of Aussie rules players are born in Tasmania. It's the main sport on the island. They even take games up to Darwin. So, I don't know. I don't know what you do, but Tasmanians are inbred. I used to live in a town called Bracknell, which is near where I live now in Maidenhead, in England. There's a town called Bracknell in Tasmania, and I was stunned that they thought, oh, it's a great idea. We've already got one dump. Let's name another dump in the middle of the outback in the bush after a dump in southern England. It's mad. And all the street names are named after women. There you go. I like the fact that you just call that all inbred. The World Cup. Tasmania is famous for a lot of things. Ricky Ponting comes from Tasmania. There you go. Ricky Ponting is a son of Tasmania. And the highest Rugby World Cup scoreline was Australia and Namibia in Tasmania as well. So it's famous. And the Port Arthur massacre, Tasmania. So Tasmania is famous for a few things. But yes, the cartoon also helped sell Tasmania to the wider world, the Tasmanian Devil. Speaking of the World Cup, Prince Harry is no longer Prince Harry. He has now dropped his royal title. He's now just Harry Windsor and Meghan Windsor. Not that anyone really cares. He's still going to be a patron for a lot of sporting bodies. He's still patron of Rugby League. He's still an avid rugby fan of both codes. He was there for the draw, but honestly, his marriage is a mess, to be honest. Personally, that's my personal opinion. Looking at someone who I've met and spoken to, and an official event, shake his hand, hello Prince Harry, hello, how are you doing? And all the, looking at his personality of him being a bit of a joker, very down to earth, very open, and look at him now, she does all the talking. It's an unequal relationship, and I think he's not the same person. Prince William is an Aston Villa fan. It's a famous fact. He's a Villa fan and has been all his life. And Harry is more of a rugby fan. Yes, it is a very known, poorly kept secret that William is more football and Harry is more rugby league and union. And it is very interesting that Princess Anne is also a rugby fan as well. Queen Elizabeth would make a mean football hooligan. She looks like a hooligan's mum, really. If you were to take her out of all the royal regalia, she looks like that tough granny on the council estate who's a bit tough, who's got about 30 grandkids who will beat the crap out of you. Jokes aside, one's a bit gay, the other's a real man. I think what Prince Harry and Prince William have done for sporting foundations and the Invictus Games and a variety of things like that is great. I think the press and the royal family is something that we can discuss on the other channel, and have they got the balance right? I think they haven't. I think Prince Harry and Meghan have used the press to promote all their positive things that they're trying to do, and then all the negative stuff. I think the relationship that the press have between the royal family and themselves and the public, I think there has to be a line drawn. It's the same with sports stars; they can't seem to get away with anything anymore. This is where I think the World Rugby League World Cup with some of the Scottish players misbehaving and getting sent home drunk. it didn't make massive headlines, but it was still damaging enough to the image of the sport that, it's still got this drink culture, which rugby league hasn't really shaken off. A lot of players end up having drink problems, and it's a thing. The England's group is I think the most physical game is going to be the Samoa game. I think the most penalised game. I think the France-England game is going to be quite feisty with the French players who play for Catalan Dragons and in the Super League and in the NRL. I hope a good French team is put out. That's going to be a feisty game, really feisty game. Greece, it's their first appearance. They're relying on expats to buff their team up, mostly Australian expats who play in reserve grade. They're going to get hammered. I feel sorry for Greece in this instance. It's their first World Cup and they're put against the hosts and some pretty solid test sides. They're going to get a beating to nothing. I do feel sorry. They should make a rule: whoever wins the Premier League or any national competition for that matter should go to Buckingham Palace, like in America, where they go to the White House for winning teams. In the past, the Queen has given out the FA Cup. She's given up the World Cup in '66. Princess Anne is the patron for Scottish rugby, and she's handed out the Calcutta Cup to the winning captain every year. Occasionally, yes, when a national side has won, like the cricket team, the England rugby team, they've gone to Downing Street. I think we do that when a national team wins a competition. Do a club team deserve the right to go? I think that's an American tradition. I think we need to keep our own traditions and our own culture. I think when it comes to sport, we're getting too Americanized over here. I worry about the fact that you got to keep some history, you got to have some tradition, whereas you got to have some modernization. But I'm not a big fan of a lot of things that a lot of Americanisms. I'm not a massive fan of it personally. I've been to Buckingham Palace and I've been to Downing Street, so I've seen both. And the bricks for Downing Street were made down my old road at an old brickworks in Bracknell. So there you go. What are my NRL 2020 predictions? Dally M, Premiership winner, Wooden Spoon, biggest improver. I don't know, really, is the honest, because of the salary cap and players having to shift around and some players going to Super League and things of that sort. I think we'll get a better idea after the first couple of weeks of how teams are playing. I think we'll get a better idea. I think the biggest improvers, that's going to be an interesting one. Again, the first couple of weeks will tell, who's going to finish where. I think the first few weeks of the season, you can see who's settling in and who's not settling in. Last season, I did a couple of videos on Brisbane and Penrith when they were struggling, and then they went on winning streaks. So obviously they listened to what I had to say. But I think the Wooden Spoon, I think Gold Coast, for me, look Wooden Spoonists every season at the moment. The Gold Coast Titans, really, they have a lot of star players and they don't gel as a team and they're a mess. So I'm going to go Wooden Spoon would be Gold Coast again. Premiership winner, even though they've lost the Latrell Mitchell, the most consistent team is the Roosters or the Storm. It's either Roosters or Storm for the minor Premiership. Oh, God, people need to stop messaging me on Facebook. So I'm going to go with the Storm or Roosters as minor premiers. The Dally M, that's a player could have a career year. So that one I'm going to leave open. Wooden Spoon, I'm going to go Gold Coast. I don't know what it is, but I think Gold Coast, they always seem to have, on paper, a really solid team. They always, but they seem to have a solid team with solid players on paper that should be around finals football. And they always really fall apart. They just can't string a set of results together. Their defense is a mess. I don't see how that's going to work. I know the Rabbitohs have signed Latrell Mitchell. I've done a video on that. You're more than welcome to watch that video on Player to Watch Latrell Mitchell. I think it's a toss-up with Latrell Mitchell, whether he should be a fullback or a left centre. And Wayne Bennett is going to have a head-scratcher because he's got a lot of depth in the back line, and the forward pack is the weakness at South. So I'm really surprised that he went to the Rabbitohs. There were rumours linking him to the West Tigers as well, but the salary cap and finances, I think... We'll see what happens there. The Roosters, yeah, Cooper Cronk's now retired. I think that is a big loss in that dressing room, but I think he's the only player to win 3 grand finals in a row with 2 different clubs. Cooper Cronk. I've got to do a video on Cooper Cronk's overall career. I think he is my favourite player of all time, Cooper Cronk. He played 1 grand final with a shattered shoulder, so I love Cooper Cronk. He really shouldn't have, but his shoulder was just falling apart and he had to have it rebuilt. I know how that feels, as I need to have shoulder surgery myself. I think the Roosters, okay, they've lost Cronk from the halves. They've lost Latrell Mitchell. We'll see how they do, but they are a very solid side. They regularly make finals football. There's been a couple of seasons where they miss out, but they are possibly the most consistent side in the comp historically. Melbourne Storm had a salary cap breach and got caught doing it, and Brisbane have lost Wayne Bennett now, so they're not as good. I think there's going to be some. I think Parramatta are going to do quite well. I think looking at the whole league, it's a very competitive league. I would say I think the weakest team is going to be the Gold Coast. Not going to lie, they always flatter to deceive. They have a couple of good games and then it just stops. They can't seem to get any kind of momentum going. And they've only made the finals a few times, I think 3 times now or 4 times in their entire existence. So they are a team that regularly struggles. Most improved, I think Penrith, now that Maloney's moved on, could that help or hinder them? Penrith could be a dark horse. Parramatta are going to be a dark horse. I think they've really now new stadium, stability off the field. That could be interesting. Cronulla, could they drop back now that Paul Gallen's retired and all the off-field issues they've got? Could they move forward? The Queensland Cowboys, could they massively improve or could they fall back further, even with Valentine Holmes? Because I think they are still missing Jonathan Thurston. And how long can Cameron Smith keep going at the Melbourne Storm? And how long can the Melbourne Storm keep bullying referees to give them decisions? There you go. I'm not a fan of the Storm at all. I like seeing the Melbourne Storm lose games. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. Have I ever been? I've never been to Australia. I would love to go. It's money and a passport and getting a sponsor because I would love to travel around all the home grounds and watch every team play at home. So for me, that would require having to go on taking all my annual leave at work and getting a sponsor to sponsor me going around all the home grounds in Australia, watching every team play a home game. That's what I would like to do. I would also like to do that in the NHL and do all the 7 Canadian teams in the NHL and watch a home game at every single NHL Canadian team. So that's Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver. Again, I would have to take annual leave and I would have to get some kind of either visa kind of sponsor kind of thing. Obviously, I'll be doing it for the channel as well, but I would have a sponsor or someone out there willing to put me up and assist. I have some subscribers who could put me up for a night here or there, but it's expensive. It's not cheap. And there's no way I could do all 31 teams, or when Seattle joins all 32 teams, that would be too much. I would need a sponsor or a ton of money, and I have neither. If the channel was to pay for itself, then in that case, it could be self-sufficient. I could take annual leave from work, and then the channel could support itself, and I can go to the odd game here or there. I'm renting my flat, and there's enough issues with my flat. We won't talk about my flat. It's stressful. My views of the Titans' new coach. Well, the Titans, they've got to do something. They have to improve. If they get another wooden spoon, then I think the writing could be on the wall for them long term. I don't know how long the NRL is going to keep a team there that's just not very good. The NRL has had to step in the running of the Titans several times, so I don't know how long they can sustain themselves where they don't have winning seasons. That their record isn't great. The Cows are a funny one because JT is the greatest to ever play, in my opinion, but in 2027 they made the grand final, who was injured for the whole season, and Mitchell Morgan. I do think they are missing Jonathan Thurston's leadership in that dressing room and around the organisation. The way they handled the Ben Barber situation as well is another thing. I do have an Instagram account, but I'm having issues accessing it because it's linked to my old phone, which broke, and I haven't been able to find the password and all the stuff to get it on my new phone, but I do have Instagram. It's just remembering my password, which is on the old phone, which is smashed to pieces, and I have to try and transfer it over. I do have Instagram. I will try and figure out how to get the bugger to work. Because I need to sort my password out. The Jonathan Thurston situation, I think the Cowboys are missing him as a leadership figure around the group. you don't have to have. Oh, it's a sports buffet. It's exactly the same as the YouTube channel, but unfortunately, I can't access it at the moment. There's no point. I've probably gained 1 billion followers on Instagram and don't have a clue. The issue with Jonathan Thurston, as I was saying, is even though he may be injured for towards the end of his career a lot, he's still around the training group when they're training. He would still be involved with the team because obviously when he comes back into the team, he's got to slot back in. They would have changed tactics and like that. It's that leadership and that advice he can give younger players. They've lost that key component of that dressing room. So I still think they're missing his leadership qualities and his him around the dressing room. Absolutely. It's a great place for the child. Oh yeah, the Gold Coast Tweeds. I've done a video on the Western Suburb Magpies being bad. Watch that. I do mention the Gold Coast Club in the early NRL seasons. The West Coast, the Western Suburbs Magpies, the worst NRL team of all time. They only played 2 seasons in the NRL, but they were an old Sydney club. Their last 2 seasons are possibly the worst 2 seasons of a club ever on record. You just have to watch the video and understand the Western Suburb Magpies of from 98 through to 99. You will never find a worse team ever. Their defense in the second season, they nearly conceded 1,000 points. So you just I love doing my sports history videos. It's the amount of research I have to do that really stresses me out because I could spend. There was one video that I spent I think 3 days researching for like just 15 minutes of video footage. It's something that I unfortunately don't have the time. Yes, the Balmain Tigers. I cover that with the West Tigers video of the history, and then I cover the Western Suburb Magpies' complete and utter disastrous end of their existence. Even though Tommy Raudonikis took them to a grand final not that long before they fell apart. Jesus Christ. Money at the end of the day. They couldn't afford to keep their good players. And to be brutally honest, as an entire existence, as a standalone club, their record for and against anyway, wins and losses, they were a bad club anyway. But their last 2 seasons, which are the first 2 seasons of NRL, they are the worst club ever for a season record. So bad. I mean, they make the Newcastle Knights really bad seasons look like, yeah, they're bad. But you actually have to look at the points for and against. At least the Newcastle Knights were losing games closely. But you have to look at the points for and against, and that was just something. What club is that, Hornet? What club is that for having a shocking 1,260 points? Ooh, that's some bad defence there. I think your defence coach needs to get sacked, personally, and hung up against a wall and machine gunned whilst hanging off piano wire off meat hooks. That is really, really bad defence. Whatever team you follow, that is shoddy defence. Conor McGregor, yeah, I heard about McGregor winning in the early hours. Not that I care. It's MMA. I have no love for the sport anymore. I did at one point. I have friends who are, involved in MMA and kickboxing and Muay Thai and boxing, but I have no love for the combat sports anymore. They've become farcical with how they're promoted. They've become farcical in how people like McGregor can commit serious criminal acts and seemingly just get away with it because I have put money and I'm famous. A team of 13, Darius Boyd. I feel sorry for him in a sense because he is and has been a solid performer at test level, origin level. And oh god, the Rochdale Hornets. I might have to look at this. Darius Boyd, I feel sorry for him, but he does get a lot of flack in the press and from fans, but he is well past his best, and I think he possibly should retire. The Rochdale Hornets. Now, I heard they were bad last year. I had no idea that they were that bad and one winning. Oh god, that is a shocking record. 1 for 26. That's bad. I might have found possibly the worst team in history. Although Brechin City went a whole season without winning a game, or they won one game in a season a couple of years ago, and they got relegated from the Scottish Championship after winning like a game. I know you won 2 games, you're not the worst team in history. I might have to look at the Rochdale Hornets, and is this the worst professional season ever? I thought the Washington Capitals of 74-75 were bad, or the Ottawa Senators in 92-93, or the San Jose Sharks in 92-93 being bad in the NHL, but the Western Suburb Magpies don't look so bad anymore. Conceding over 1,200 points, nearly 1,300 points defensively. I'm going to have to look at those stats and go, is this possibly the worst team in rugby league ever? That's bad. That makes the Newcastle Knights, who had some bad seasons recently, look good. That is shocking. I can't believe I'm reading that. Like, 1 win in 20... Wait, that means you had 27 league games, which means you should have had 28 league games. So you should have lost 27 unless you drew a game. If you drew a game, that makes it interesting, because that is a... I'm going to have to look at Rochdale Hornets and their shockingly bad season. I'm going to have to look at that. There is no way that a team can be that bad. Even at the second tier level, there's no way. I find that hard to believe, but at the same time, you had Summer Bash. Yeah. Of course you did. Of course we did. Of course you did. The Summer Bash. And of course you have bye rounds as well. Yeah, you have the Magic Bash. Yeah. I'm going to have to look into this and see how bad the Rochdale Hornets actually are, because that is an absolute shocking. Whoever was their defense coach just deserves never to work ever again. I feel sorry for the players who play on that team, because obviously they're trying their hardest. And of course, there's a relegation system, isn't there? It's not as if there's like it's a ring fence league. There's a promotion relegation system, and they've only won 1 game. That is, I'm not sure if I want to really, but I'm going to have to now, because I've now got a video to research for this afternoon. Because I shouldn't have a video to research for this afternoon, but I'm now looking at the shockingly bad Rochdale Hornets of 2019. That is something that I wasn't expecting to have a video on. But I have always said to people, could you please find me really bad sporting seasons so I can look at them and go, how bad is this team? That is something I have regularly asked viewers, is to find me a team that is that bad, who have gone a whole season with either winning 1 game. Well, I'll just put down a subscriber, one of my moderators. Look, it can't be that bad. I mean, it's Rochdale. I mean, Christ, I'm putting Rochdale on the map here. People might actually watch the video and go, how bad is this team? Let's go to Rochdale and actually watch a game. I'm assuming they're now in League One. I'm assuming they've now gone semi-pro, not professional, so they've had to really drop down a level. I do feel sorry for the players that have played on that team, especially if there's young players who are out on loan trying to develop their skills from a Super League club, and they're getting hammered. I feel sorry for a team that does lose that badly, but at the same time, there's that, like Derby County in the Premier League getting 11 points. You have to look at it, and sometimes there are teams that are that bad. I mean, Stoke City had the record of the top flight's worst ever season until Derby County. Until Derby County. But when you have a song saying how crap are you, or how shit are you, we're winning away, and then you still lose the game, that tells you something about how the fans at least had a laugh about the situation. Because when Bracknell Bees were really, really bad, worse than they're doing now, I think it was one season we won like 4 games or 5 games or something, and that was painful. The Cardiff Fire, I think, went a whole season without winning a game. They were granted a draw because a game got called off because of weather, because safety concerns of getting to an ice hockey game, and they had 2 overtime losses. So they went a whole season without actually winning a game, but they got points. But they were completely they were not even semi-professional; they were amateur. compared to the rest of the league. I've never come across a team with professional players, because I know saying professional, there are some professionals in the squad who are that bad. And there has to be some players on loan from Super League clubs, youth players, clearly on loan. They've taken a beating. And when you're getting on the team bus for an away game, and you know you're going to, I don't know, the Wolfpack. The Wolfpack are playing. You got to play the Wolfpack, and you know you're going to get battered by a lot of points. That's embarrassing when you're singing "Nothing Special, we lose every week." I mean, at least the fans have got some banter about them, but that's gotta hurt the players. I'm going to have to look into the Rochdale Hornets 2019 season and just see how bad it was, because that makes the Western Suburb Magpies look like a pretty well-run organisation. No, I didn't like MMA because how brutal it is. I love a bit of blood and gore. I love the fact when hockey players fight and a bit of the old biff. What I don't like about MMA is how that their athletes can severely misbehave outside of the octagon. Because if I was to do that and get arrested on a regular basis like Conor McGregor, I would lose my job. We have company policies in place saying, company discipline. If I bring the company to disrepute, we've had people fired just for being hungover, and they've come in and said, "Look, I don't feel great. I'm going to fail the drug test. I've drunk too much last night. I would like to be sent home ill, please." And they fired him. Right? So Conor McGregor going into a pub and assaulting an old man by sucker punching him, and he doesn't go to prison. I am sorry. The legal system has allowed someone who has got a position of fame or money. Oh no, it's company policy. If we have a drink drugs policy, because I'm a bin man, we have to work with we have to work with heavy machinery and yard machinery and plant machinery. We have to comply by being sober. We have to put down on a piece of paper. We have to tell the company if we're put on any medication for any reason. It's company policy. And I understand why they have the company policy. I'm not an engineer, I'm just a bin man, but at the same time, back of a bin truck, there's moving parts. We are out in public. We are a public-facing job. I can't go to work steamed. And we've had people fired for drinking on the job. It's a company policy. It doesn't matter what department I am in the company. I could be in the office. I could be in the accounts department. If I have a hangover and I come in, not gonna lie. Not gonna lie. A lot of companies will have some kind of drugs policy or drink policy. Every company I've worked at has had on a notice board the drink drug policy. Whether they enforce it or not is another thing. But if I was to do what Conor McGregor's done outside of work, and someone films that, I'm fired. It doesn't matter that I'm not in work uniform or I'm not at work. I'm fired. What he did in the Brooklyn car park, I would be very fired because it was filmed. So it's a thing. It's not a. It's a lot of companies. If you ask about company disciplinary policy about what happens outside of work, if you have any legal trouble, they can let you go. If you lose your driving license or have any kind of criminal charge, even if it's a suspended sentence and a fine, they can let you go because it damages the image of the company. And it may be in company policy that you can't have a criminal conviction working for said company because of DRB check. It's a thing. Honestly, if you ask your employer about what is the drink drug policy, what is the disciplinary policy, what's company policy, if I was to hypothetically get arrested for drunken disorderly or get a fine or a suspended sentence, just ask them. Have a look at your company notice board. Have a look on the notice board at wherever you're working. You'll be surprised what company policy is, even though you're not involved with work. It's outside of work. You haven't been given a custodial, so you've got a suspended or you've got a public nuisance against you. You've got a fine, magistrate's appearance, a fine. You got to pay court costs. They can fire you. It's totally legitimate. It's totally legal, and there's nothing you can do about it. Amateur level, 508 points in 6 games. That is bad. That's nearly I would say 85 points a game average they're conceding. That's bad. And that's obviously at amateur level, but that is not a good record to have, conceding points. Wow. I'm going to have to look at the Rochdale Hornets. That's something I'm going to have a look at as a historically bad team. I've got to do a video on bad, really shockingly poor teams. The West Side Rabbitohs in New South Wales at lower level, amateur level. So one of the grassroots clubs, they got battered. So in 6 games, they conceded about 85 points a game, average. That is a pretty shocking defence if you're conceding over 80 points a game. Derby County, yes, they have a historically low for the top flight record. I think Stoke had the record before Sunderland broke it twice, and then Derby broke Sunderland's record, and then Fulham got pretty close. Huddersfield got pretty close last season as well, with almost getting historic lows, although they got more points than Derby did. Derby with 11 points is the lowest top flight points total for a team. I think the lowest top flight points total for a team is Ancona in Italy with 5 points back in 2003, 2004. That was a historically bad team. But there's been some pretty bad ones. I think, what else? Who else are we looking at? The Washington Capitals in the NHL in 74, 75, historically bad. What else? Teams get relegated, you receive over 100 million. Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to be looking at a worst teams seasons in sport. Absolutely, I've already done a couple with the Western Suburb Magpies. I've done one there. I think I've got a few more. I think Brecon City's one. There are a few more I can look at. Villa, the season Villa got relegated, and that FA Cup final against Man City, which was a record equaling final. I think for conceding goals, but they were hammered. Villa at that point had been mismanaged off the field terribly, and it took a while for them to come back to the Premier League. I don't know what, how much that's actually helped the team or not. But we'll see what happens with Villa. I think they've had a solid return to the Premier League for now, but the second half of the season is to come. I think a lot of teams that end up getting relegated have poor off-field management, and a lot of teams just financially can't compete. But when a team gets relegated from the Premier League in this country, they get about 60 to 100 million pounds in payments. You are rewarded for failure. That should just not happen. I think Wolves. I mean, Watford have struggled this season, but I think Wolves would have been a better finalist. They knew how to beat Man City. They had beaten them in several cup competitions and also taken them to penalties before as well. I think Wolves would have possibly given Man City a harder task because the style of football they play. I think they have Pep Guardiola's number. Espirito Santo knows how to knows how to beat Pep. Klopp knows how to beat Pep. I think, that Man City FA Cup win last year, it was Watford had their moments early on, and then Man City started scoring, and then it went. The Cleveland Browns did own Villa. Yeah, Cleveland Browns have a pedigree in being, shocking. I think there was one season they lost every single game. If I'm not mistaken, I think they went a year and a half without winning a game. The Cleveland Browns in recent memory. The Cleveland Browns are bad. I could do a video on the Cleveland Browns. Yeah. A video on the Cleveland Browns. That would be interesting. How bad the Cleveland Browns, how bad can they get? Wolves have done a double over them in the league this season. It's a pity they're knocked out of the cup by Man United in replay. But I think Wolves are a decent side that people should be aware of. I think last year they were unlucky not to get the FA Cup final. If they won that, things could have been a lot different. I think we're seeing a changing of the. The Cleveland Browns won the whole year without winning a game. I will do a video on the Cleveland Browns winless season. I have to, their record there, but they only play like 18 games a season or 16 games a season. I mean, the NFL seasons are so short that really they're not as shocking as a longer schedule. Like rugby league or ice hockey or football, where teams, go winless for months at a time. Odell Beckham Jr. He's been in the headlines for some weird things. Antonio Brown's been in the headlines. There are the Cleveland Browns were pre NFL and pre Super Bowl era. They are one of the most successful teams. Much like the Maple Leafs in the NHL pre the expansion era in '67, really successful team. Modern era, no, just no, really bad. But I'm going to have to do a video playlist on shocking seasons by teams because the Western Suburb Magpies is a starting point. Rochdale Hornets of last season, I'm going to have to look at this and go, how bad is this team? And can someone fight Cincinnati Bengals? The Bengals are pretty bad as well, actually. The Jacksonville Jaguars, the Buccaneers, in fact, anyone from Florida apart from the Dolphins, pretty bad. The 49ers have had some shocking seasons. The Oakland Raiders have had some really diabolical seasons in their existence. There are some bad teams out there. In a league which is supposed to be built on parity, it is pretty terrible. The Cleveland Browns' recent struggles, they are really bad. Yeah. Wolves doing a double relegation. Other clubs have done that as well. Wolves doing double relegation is not the only team to do it. There are several teams that have done that. This is something that's going to make people be really surprised. One of the founding clubs of the Premier League in 1992 was Swindon Town. Look where they are now. Oldham Athletic, look where they are now. Two of the founders of the Premier League, look where they are now, and the struggles they are having. That will put the downer up, yeah. I think Sunderland did double relegation as well. Yeah, there are some bad teams out there. I could look at Derby County about 12 years ago with that shocking season. Did Leicester and Norwich not do it? I think Norwich might have. I know Norwich ended up in League One at one point. Blackburn ended up in League One at one point. No, it's not. Swindon's not a big city. Swindon's actually a sizable population. They were a good team in the late 80s, early 90s. They were actually a very, very good team. The problem being that the Premier League hasn't actually benefited football as much as people think. The TV revenue hasn't benefited people and clubs as much as people think. Wimbledon, yeah, Bolton. There's a lot of teams that have really been in the Premier League that aren't doing so well now. And people think, oh, the Premier League's been great for football. It might be great for club football. It's not actually great for it might have been great for some clubs. The majority of football hasn't benefited from the subscription TV with Sky and BT and ESPN and all this. Football hasn't actually, sport in general hasn't benefited as much as people think from the TV packages. It really hasn't. The money isn't equally distributed. There's a lot of clubs which actually have a lot of debt. And there's been a meeting of the UEFA. So all the top European leagues, more than just the top five, have all met. And I think the Finnish FA, the Finnish delegation, I think last year, went up and said to UEFA, if this carries on, our league is going bust. And part of the problem is they've got rid of the Cup Winners' Cup back in '99. Part of the problem is the Champions League and UEFA Cup, the Europa League, have been restructured, and they want to add this third competition in, when in reality, all they had to do was keep the Cup Winners' Cup. Because domestic cup competitions have been devalued for 20 years, the same clubs go into Europe. The same clubs go into Europa League or Champions League qualify from the second tier set of leagues that are professional in Europe. So the big leagues always get their 3 to 4 clubs going into the Champions League and their 2 clubs going into the Europa League. And then there's the odd one that goes through the qualification process. That second tier of nations where the leagues are slightly smaller, a bit less wealthy, they're losing money. A lot of the Eastern European and Central European leagues are broke. The old firm debate about should the old firm join the English system? They'll get battered week in, week out and be a Championship League One level. It wouldn't save Scottish football; it would kill it, because then the only major derby you would have left would be the Hibs Hearts or Dundee United, or Aberdeen Motherwell, and that's just not going to sell it. The issue with Scottish football is the lack of competitiveness and the lack of money. You take the old firm out of Scotland, Scottish football is completely dead. And the debate about should the top Scottish clubs, join the English league system, been going on for 20, 30 years. There's only 3 or 4 or 5 clubs that could possibly survive, but then you've got to think of the travel, the away days. If you are a Plymouth Argyle fan, are you really going to want to travel all the way up to, let's say, Aberdeen on an away day? No, you're not going to want to do that. You're not going to want to do that at all. That's just not a sustainable model for the British league system. It's not sustainable. Let's say Inverness get back to the Scottish Premiership and they decide to merge the Scottish League with the English league system. Are you going to want to say Inverness or Ross County up in the Highlands are going to want to go all the way down to, let's say, Gillingham? Must be another one of the longest away days. Or Ipswich. It's not going to happen. Or Brighton. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. And the Scottish clubs do not have the money to give away free transport to the fans. They just don't have the cash. Rangers are still financially unstable. Celtic have had their own cash flow problems in their recent history. It's not as if Rangers are the only club to go bust. Dunfermline have basically bust. Livingston have basically gone bust. Gretna's got out of business. That's based on the English border. Scottish football has been bust for years. And part of the problem is the satellite TV companies. Setanta, UK going bust, nearly killed Scottish football 12 years ago. The UK isn't that big, but here's the thing. France and Germany have better transport links. They have united FAs. So Germany and France, yeah, the countries are bigger, but the transport systems are better. They're more efficient. They're cheaper. The away tickets are cheaper. Tickets and travel are cheaper on the continent. They are actually cheaper. The rail networks are in better shape than the British rail network, partly because of the war and having to rebuild the whole of Europe. The British rail network wasn't as badly screwed up as the German and the French rail networks were completely destroyed, and they had to be completely rebuilt. The amount of investment in the infrastructure is better. The autobahns, 60%, I believe, are unrestricted. The way you say the UK isn't that big, that may be the case, but it's the infrastructure. Yeah, we're paying more for lower quality. Yeah. But because we haven't had to completely rebuild the infrastructure over the last 70 years, unlike the Germans and the French and the Italians to some point, and the Dutch and the Eastern Europeans, we have decaying infrastructure that wasn't as damaged in World War II, whereas most of Europe was completely annihilated and had to be completely rebuilt in a very short space of time. So a lot of centralized investment went into rebuilding Europe after the war. Yeah, no, east to west, not so bad. It's north to south. So the longest away days are generally north of England to south of England, or north of Scotland to south of Scotland. Oh yeah, the standard of Scottish football is they're having to invite teams from other leagues in to bolster it. Absolutely. The Scottish League, there's a reason why Scotland haven't qualified for a major tournament in over 20 years, whereas Wales and Northern Ireland, Republic, and England regularly do, or regularly close to qualification. Scotland are well off the pace, yet they have more professional clubs than Wales and Northern Ireland. Scotland are well off qualifying for a major international tournament. Not even close. It's not Steve Clarke's fault that the national team are where they are. It's going to take a lot of patience to rebuild and develop players from youth level and get the grassroots clubs working. The last team to win the league that wasn't Rangers or Celtic was Aberdeen. And that was well over 35 years ago. So, yes, there is a problem when you need another team to get their name on the track. Kilmarnock had maintained their run that they were doing under Steve Clarke and actually won the league, I honestly believe that would have massively benefited Scottish football to get a new name on the trophy for the first time in 30 years. That's the problem. I wouldn't say all the good Scottish players go south the border to play, because the quality of Scottish player, apart from Andy Robertson notwithstanding, not very good. The quality level's definitely dropped off over the last 20 years. We're not getting the Ali McCoists of Scottish football anymore, or the Dalglishes, or the Dennis Laws. We're just not getting them. They're not being produced anymore, and that's the problem as well. Is the quality level is definitely just dropped off a cliff. And you could argue, yes, the TV money, and trying to market games. There's very few clubs that have big followings. Rangers, most followed club. After that, Celtic, most fans are not Scottish. Aberdeen is a sizable population but limited fan base. If you think about it, Motherwell, Hibs, and Hearts, that's a divided city. Again, Edinburgh is not the biggest city in the world, but I do work with a Hibs fan who's in our office, in our depot. It's not as easy to market Scottish football as you think, because the glory days of Scottish football are 30 years ago. And the way the sport has moved on and evolved, because you've taken away the Cup Winners' Cup, you're not getting that Aberdeen in Europe. You're not getting that Hibs or Hearts playing in Europe. If the Cup Winners' Cup was still a thing, other Scottish clubs would get European exposure, and that hasn't happened for 20 years. That's part of the problem. That's part of the problem with UEFA, is they've taken away the Cup Winners' Cup. Had they left that cup competition, other Scottish clubs like Aberdeen, Motherwell, Hibs, Hearts, Falkirk, all that would have got exposure over the last 20 years. Inverness, they would have actually had that exposure into European football, and got that TV money, and UEFA took that away, and that is part of the problem. But this is where these smaller European leagues outside the top five, so England, Italy, Spain, Germany, and France, because the Cup Winners' Cup is gone, those smaller leagues are struggling to get European exposure and global exposure. And the French are now getting rid of their League Cup. So that is part of the problem, is UEFA devaluing the domestic cup competitions. That's why the FA Cup is struggling to draw fans now. There's less reason to win it. It's less vital now for clubs now than what it was 25 years ago when you won the League Cup or the FA Cup. You went into European football. Even if your league form was you finished 16th, you won the cup. You're playing in Europe. You're getting some of that European exposure. People want to invest. There's been talk of doing that, but at the same time, Spain and Portugal don't like each other very much. Belgium and Holland don't like each other very much. There's a long-standing historical problems between these countries. Ironically, they're not big fans of each other if you look in history. The Dutch league and the Belgian league are more competitive than people realise. The issue is money, and again, the Cup Winners' Cup being taken away is part of the problem. Massive part of the problem. And also the TV rights in this country, at least, going off free to wear for European club football, massive issue, massive problem. Fans aren't happy with it. That's reduced viewership, and people really giving a toss. People care less now. Because the League Cup's gone off free to air TV the last decade, because European football over the last 5 years has been taken away from free to air TV for club level, it's really put people off. And I'm starting to see a trend here with a lot of people falling out of love with football to a certain extent. And we are seeing that with lower crowd numbers. And we are seeing that with I honestly believe, if Liverpool Man United was on free-to-air TV today, that viewership figure would be over 30 million people. It would be. Globally, it probably was. But in this country, I would say, how many people have Sky Sports or BT Sport who really care, who want to watch that? If Tottenham Arsenal only drew 90,000 viewers on BT Sport last season, tells you all you need to know about how people actually watch, how many people actually buy the Sky or BT Sport subscriptions. It's falling. People are switching off. They're illegally streaming. More people illegally streamed Arsenal Tottenham last season than actually watched on BT Sport. Just putting that out there. More people illegally streamed Anthony Joshua's world title fight when he won, not the one against Ruiz, but the one before he lost. So 3 fights ago, more people illegally streamed that than paid for the pay-per-view. It tells you something, all you need to know really, about what people feel about subscription sports and then having to pay another. At least in Australia, when you pay for Fox, you get ad-free when the games are on. And Sky's too expensive. BT Sport's a joke. And Premier Sports, you have to have a Sky box to watch it. Even though Free Sports, all you need is a free set box. So Free Sports and Premier Sports is the fastest growing sports network in the UK. some of the channels you can only get if you have a Skybox. If you have FreeSat, you can't get it. Or Freeview. You have to have a Skybox, which is wrong. You should have the option to be able to buy it off FreeSat and go, right, I want this. And I think Premier Sports eventually will go, we're going on FreeSat along with Free Sports. We're going to change our name to Free Sports 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think they've worked out having a free-to-air sports network is what people want. Eurosport used to be like that, and then they put that behind a paywall. Their viewership figures have dropped. And ironically, they have to keep ads because the subscriptions don't make them enough money. That's why adverts remain on Sky. That's why adverts remain on Sky Sports and BT Sport, is they're not making enough money. ESPN in the US, I don't know. I honestly don't know. TV rights is a big thing, and after 2021, there's going to be a lot of restructuring. You're going to see a lot of changes in the next couple of years. And I can see free-to-air starting to win the battle again. There needs to be shared rights for leagues. There needs to be at least some Football League or Premier League on free-to-air. They used to have that on BBC for a while. That didn't last very long. They've now put the highlights show on a crappy TV slot on Channel 5 off BBC. It's on a worse slot now than what it was before. So again, viewership figures aren't great. And people wonder why clubs in the Championship and the below are struggling financially. They're getting the real crap end of the stick. Oh yeah, I mean, I used to love Grandstand, but when Eurosport stopped being free to air, and when we lost a lot of TV rights on free to air to pay per view only, that's a problem. And yeah, Champions League, the old Cup Winners' Cup used to be on Channel 5 for a while. It was on BBC as well. Europa League, what was the UEFA Cup, was also on free to air, and Champions League. When they took that away, agreed. They've gone for that. The clubs can let us in for free, and they still have massively overinflated ticket prices, and the players' wages is obscene. The players are part of the problem. The agents are part of the problem. And fans are starting to go, And I'm not a fan of Spurs' new stadium, by the way. That was an earlier question. I'm not a fan of the new stadium of Spurs. It looks like a toilet bowl you have in a hospital. I know Amateur Rugby League, you can watch it on Bar TV. Bar TV on YouTube, yeah. They also, I also follow the... what else do I watch? The Aussie Rules in Northern Territory, the AFL Northern Territory. I watched that on YouTube. You can get the Australian Ice Hockey League on YouTube, and Major League Rugby, which is on YouTube as well. So yeah, I think fans have basically said enough's enough. The average salary has been stagnant for over a decade, yet player wages have gone through the roof. How clubs can justify their profits when the average fan in the street some of them can't even afford to feed themselves is disgusting. And how the players can justify their wage demands. I'm not a fan of Danny Rose. I can't live on 50 grand a week. I need 100 grand. Mate, you're not even worth 100 quid. Not gonna lie. You earn in a week what it would take me 2 to 3 years to earn. Something like that, before tax. And the tax man is taking a lot off me. I just cannot accept their wage demands for kicking a ball around. I cannot. If they were getting paid that a year, 50 to 100 grand a year, I would accept that. 400 grand a year, I could accept that. A week, some of these wages are like $1 million, like 2 million a month or something, or 1.8 million a month. If that's a yearly contract, I can accept that. A weekly contract, come on. That's where I think that the problem lies, is the overinflated transfer market, the agents' fees, and the player wages. They've either got... some of these players aren't even that good, and they're earning big money, and they're not really that good. The quality level has definitely dropped. As wages have gone up, the quality level, I think, has dropped. That's my personal opinion. And yeah, the amount of sponsorship now, and even Premier League kits, you've got more than one sponsor now on the kit. The Championship, League One, League Two, it's multiple sponsors. Rugby League's gone that way for years because there's no money in the sport. They're desperate for money. Rugby Union's started to go that way. This is why North Americans, with their kit, their sponsorless NHL, NFL kind of kits, they think our kits look really tacky when it comes to ice hockey, football, rugby league. They think our team kits look hideous and tacky, and they're right. They do. They don't look as good. They don't look as nice. They look really, really vile. and the North Americans can't get their head around it. They just cannot. How reliant other countries are on sports on sponsors being on the jerseys. They just can't get their head around it. And oh yeah, I have to admit the NHL jerseys are beautiful because they have a lack of sponsorship. They are stunning, absolutely stunning. And the Major League Soccer, they only have the one sponsor on their jerseys, so I've got used to having sponsorship on jerseys, but when you've only got the one on a jersey, that's fine. When you've got like 4 or 5, it's just like, can you stop now? Because I can't work out what the team colours are because you've got 4 or 5 different sponsors on there. Oh no, well, Barcelona, too good for sponsors. Yeah, they sold out, didn't they? They're not the only team not to have sponsorship on their jerseys for long periods of time, but Barcelona, they sold out. Oh yeah, Roma, they used to have no sponsor for a long time. That was iconic. They all sell out in the end. Money talks. I think, yeah, what we're seeing now is the reliance on corporate sponsorship. And yeah, when the Middle East came calling and all the betting firms, when basically that first betting firm got put on a football shirt, they all did it. And now we're seeing a change in tune because they're going to have to change how clubs and betting sponsorship and the changing rules. They're going to have to comply, and the amount of TV companies that have breached the new rules already. But yeah, the Middle East money came calling. The plastic clubs came calling. The dirty money, as I call it, of human rights abuses and terrorism came calling. To be honest, I don't mind a single sponsor, not too big. It's just the sleeve, but it's getting that way. Watch rugby league, mate. Their jerseys are covered. Watch British ice hockey and European ice hockey. They've got about 20 sponsors on a jersey and the shorts. I'm not joking. Seriously, watch European ice hockey. Even the ice has got sponsors all over it, and the North Americans just can't cope. They have but bear in mind, North America is the most corporate place in the world with big ads in your face. They can't cope when team jerseys have sponsors on, yet they're the most corporate, in your face, capitalist society in the world. But no, they can't have that on the team jersey. But yeah, I do think you've got to strike a balance. I don't like it. I think it looks very, very tacky, but it is what it is. Yeah, they're worth billions, but for the most corporate capitalist society in the world, they can't cope with a sponsor on a jersey. They can't cope with it. Their heads explode. Yet everywhere you go, there's billboards, advert. Every 5 minutes, there's an ad break. North American sports, I've watched the broadcast, ad break, TV break. There's a minimum of 3 TV breaks a period in the NHL, plus the interperiod breaks. Major League Baseball, it's constant. NFL, constant. Yet they can't cope with one sponsor on a jersey, but they can deal with all the TV advertising constantly in your face. I can't deal with that. This is why I can't get into baseball. It's just so broken up. This is why I can't stand at NFL. It's so broken up. I can deal with ice hockey because you can get a lot of. The 100 cricket format. All the sponsors are fast food, junk food. KP Crisps, KP Foods, which is a fast food company. So the roasted nuts, Skips, Space Raiders or something. KP, the 100, meant to be sport, maybe athletic, healthy, all fast food crap. Well done, ECB. You got all because you're advertising for kids and families, so you've advertised with junk food. Great. This is why I hope the 100 fails and fails miserably, because cricket needs to save itself by really having the ECB having its, looking at. Oh, but we've given some free-to-air rights. Yeah, for a competition that no one wants. Great. And all the teams are sponsored by a fast food company. So one sponsor, title sponsor, and their uniforms are crap. And you're aiming this at kids. So, well done. The only people who actually agree with it are those players on centralized contracts. Yeah, because they're not interviewing people who disagree with it. If you actually got an independent view, an unbiased view, you would have 90, because they're aiming it to get new fans into the sport by coming up with a really complicated version of the sport, which isn't cricket. It's a thing. It's a mess. come up by a TV executive, no doubt, or an advertising executive. Let's make it a pure advert for kids by having junk food adverts all over the jerseys. Oh yeah, and a lot of counties, a lot of locations don't have a team. And when you've got an Irishman who's a black and tan, which a lot of English people don't like, and a lot of Irish don't like, and Owen Morgan being the London captain, yay, because you have two teams county-wise that have their county grounds, Middlesex and Surrey. Lords and the Oval are in London. You have a rivalry there already. You've decided to go, nah, we're going to get rid of that. Well done. Black and tan, it's a term that goes back to the Irish independence movement. A black and tan is a loyalist Irishman. And the black and tans were not a very nice paramilitary group as well. A black and tan is an insult. It's not a positive thing to call an Irishman a black and tan. It's meant to be an insult and a racist term, actually. A black and tan. Basically, a black and tan was a Catholic Irishman, or even a Protestant Irishman who was a loyalist who committed atrocities against. No, it's the opposite of the IRA. It's a Leinsterman or a Munsterman or a man from Connaught who fought for the English crown against the nationalist movement. So you could be a Catholic or a Protestant, but you're not from Ulster. So you're a Southern Irishman who supports the English crown, or is willing to be allied to the UK. Even if you're a Catholic or Protestant, doesn't matter. You're willing to sell yourself to be a mercenary for Britain. It's the opposite of the IRA, and they committed some. They are scum. Even in loyalist circles, a lot of them see them as scum, because they're not Ulstermen. They are Leinstermen, Munstermen, and men of Connaught, and they're not seen as Ulstermen. And they're not liked. No, they're not very popular. A black and tan is also someone who could be an Ulsterman who's signed up for the Irish government as well. Black and tan is not a positive connotation you want as an Irishman. It means you will sell yourself to the highest bidder, be it the Irish government or the British government. It's not a nice term. It's not a nice term. And people are calling Owen Morgan a black and tan on Facebook and Twitter. He's getting a lot of that because he's sold himself to the ECB rather than the Irish Cricket Board, who could have reused him at test level as a test batsman. He decided when Ireland was struggling to get test status, he decided to cash in with the ECB. So he's lost a lot of respect in Ireland. And he's not necessarily the most popular figure with all cricket fans. He should have stuck it out with Ireland, and a lot of the Irish team have a lack of respect for him because he decided to leave them high and dry when they were struggling to get test status. Now they have test status. He's loving it up with the ECB on his centralised contract when they could use someone of his skill in their side. True, but at the same time, a lot of the Irish players stuck it out through thick and thin when Owen Morgan went for the money. And Owen Morgan is not even that good a player, actually, to be fair. There's a lot of errors in his game, and his captaincy has been questioned at times. Even though he's won the World Cup, there were periods where he was absolutely shocking as a captain and as a player. Yet the ECB had him on a centralised contract, so they had to play him. This is why I don't like centralised contracts. This is part of the problem with the ECB. They're overpaying players who are not worth it. Boyd Ranking went back. Yeah, he did. He did go back to Ireland, and now Ireland got test status. Players who are eligible for Ireland, so they want to play for them. Owen Morgan burnt that bridge. He's never ever swapping over. And they were offering a lot of Irish players who play for the county system, who are naturalised British or grandparent or parent who was Irish, and a lot of them have gone. Actually, yeah, we'll give this Irish test team a crack. We'll give it a go. We'll get test status. I'm now a test bowler. I'm now a test batsman. Regardless if they win or lose, they go, I'm playing test cricket. I never thought this would happen. Bang. And yes, test cricket's got its own problems, but the ECB with 100, that's not a format for me that's going to work. I hope it fails massively. They're trying to merge rivals together like Surrey and Middlesex with the London team. That's going to go down like a sack of shit. Really is. A Birmingham team. Come on, it's Warwickshire. Come on. Get it right. And the idea was to grow new fans to the game. They're pissing off the 95% of fans that they need who are going, I'm not going to watch cricket again. Or sod this, I hope it fails. There are cricket fans hoping the 100 fails, and 95% of the fan base are against it. I've had arguments on Twitter and Facebook, and I've just given up with people who think it's a good idea because they clearly haven't worked out it's not cricket. It's an unnecessary format. They should be really pushing free-to-air coverage of domestic tests, possibly Ireland, one-day internationals, county cricket. They're not doing that. They've come up with a new format, giving a few games on free-to-air and some highlights, and no one wants it. Oh yeah, it's great to see Ireland and Afghanistan get test status. Absolutely. I think they fought long and hard for it. But cricket's got a lot of problems, and a lot of it's to do with the TV rights and accessibility, and it's seen as an elitist sport. There's match fixing allegations. Oh, look, the Dutch play it, but again, they haven't got test status. Namibia play it in Africa as well. They haven't got test status, even though Zimbabwe has. Even though Zimbabwe has got a hideous human rights record, but that's another thing. And I've been out in the political wilderness for years, geopolitically, with the Commonwealth, got thrown out. Yeah, I think cricket's got a lot of problems. A lot of it's to do with match fixing and corruption, and that's not going away. That's been a constant problem for years, and it does implicate English players. English players are implicated in corruption allegations, and they have been for a couple of years now. There's been allegations against English players before when it comes to corruption, and I think a English player was done for match fixing. He went to prison. There are issues with cricket. It is actually more popular outside the Commonwealth than you think. They play it in the Netherlands, so Holland plays it. It is popular outside the Commonwealth. They could do more to grow it outside of its traditional locations, absolutely, but that's up to the ICC. And there's massive rugby league and rugby union is growing outside the old Commonwealth nations. It is, and it is played at international level at various levels outside of the old. The issue with the ICC is the international cricket is corruption allegations is really hindering the sport. Corruption allegations involving high-level test players. Players have gone to prison who are first-class quality players who play domestic first class and who have played test, like Sreesanth, Indian fast bowler, prison. A lot of Pakistani players match fixing, prison, and they're not going away. And that is something that is a hindrance to the sport. Is the corruption of the sport? Yeah, if they have a school uniform and play cricket, yeah, that's generally a pretty good bet. South Africa, Australia, here, obviously Canada. Canada's a point, and a lot of state schools now some state schools have dropped the school uniform. The league union split, that hotel in Huddersfield. I can definitely go do a video on why there are two codes and why it's a north-south divide, generally speaking, although that's merging a bit now, blurring a bit now. But yeah, there's a reason why league and union split, absolutely. And it comes down to that meeting in a hotel in Huddersfield. There was a disagreement on how the game should have been played. Should it be professional or amateur? Or should the players get paid, or should they just do it in their spare time? There was a definite division between North and South as well. There was a class division. It happened for a variety of reasons, some of it economical, some of it social. And there was a meeting in a hotel in Huddersfield in the 1860s, and the rest is history, really. And rugby league actually is an older version. The rules that we have for rugby league are actually older than rugby union. The 13-a-side game has rules set in stone. And a basis, and union did change a little bit, and there. I wonder if it has grown on happen. I think they're now, instead of having them classed as codes, I think they're two separate sports altogether. Rugby league and rugby union are just generally separate. They have separate World Cups. They have separate league organisations. They have separate international rules. How does it grow on happen with the game? I think rugby league has a growth issue, and there are ways of really making it a more popular game and sport outside of the traditional areas. It has an issue with growing in non-traditional locations, whereas rugby union seems to have gone global. You look at the amount of countries that play union at test level, and that's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then below. They play it in Finland. Finland and the Czech Republic are the two worst sides when it comes to rugby union international level. but it's played at amateur or semi-pro professional level across the world. Rugby union is played almost globally. Rugby league, however, while it is still a global game, less countries play at a test level, less countries play at amateur level with semi-professional and amateur and then professional clubs. So I think rugby league could be better. Rugby league is the secondary code for player participation. More clubs globally have a rugby union club because an amateur can play it. Rugby league, for some reason, less amateur clubs play it, and that's a problem. And that's where the grassroots problem. And that's not just an Australian or English problem or a Kiwi problem. That is a problem globally. Is there's less amateur clubs and semi-pro clubs playing rugby league than rugby union. Rugby union has more registered players than league who say I'm a rugby league player as an amateur. That's the issue. And union is bigger than league. It has more registered players, more fans, and more clubs. That's the simple issue. Is there are more people playing union than league, even though league has been professional for longer. Rugby league has been professional for over 100 years. Rugby union's only been professional since 1995, yet rugby union has more registered players and more interest. And that is what stuns me, is there's more money in union, yet it's only been professional for 25 years, whereas rugby league's been professional for nearly a century, fully, at the top level, yet there's less money in the sport. That is what is stunning. That is what's stunning is rugby league has been professional for so long, union's been professional for so short, yet more people play union and there's more money in union, although the division of money and where the money goes is a problem, and crowd numbers and financial long-term viability of leagues and clubs. We've been discussing it with Saracens and what happened there with their salary cap breach and the Welsh club game being an utter mess and going so forth and so forth, because football, the other code of football, yes, association football, has been the dominant sport for so long. Yet the rules for rugby are older than the rules for football. The Football League comes after the Rugby Union Rugby League split. The Football League is not established until after Rugby League and Rugby Union split and divided. That is how ironic it is. Rugby is actually technically officially older than football as we currently see it, with the 15, 13 and 11-a-side games. Rugby Union, Rugby League are about the same age because rugby split. So the 1860s. The Football League comes later by about 4 or 5 years. The rules of rugby were written down in the 1830s. The FA wasn't set up until the 1860s, 1870s. Rugby union and rugby league are older than association football or soccer. That's what's hilarious is rugby's older. As in an official written down the rules of the game and having a governing body, the first governing body and the first rules being written down and the sport being set in stone as these are the rules. Shinty's even older. Shinty is older. Ice hockey, ironically, is actually older than rugby union, rugby league, and football. But we're not going to go into the age of sports. Shinty's actually an older sport, and that's still played in Scotland and in Canada. Curling is older as well. Oh, God. But professional sport as being organised, you can go back to the ancient Romans with gladiators and chariot racing. Not all gladiators and chariot races were slaves. A lot of them were actually free men who were professional and got paid for it. So professional. And you can go back to the Olympic Games in ancient Greece for organised sporting events. We can go back to classical history for that. But we're not going to. We're going to look at modern sport in the modern era, which is anything from 1850 onwards. Organised sport, cricket, both codes of rugby, AFL, Aussie rules. That's another one. Association football. And then the North American sports like basketball and things like that. It's only really in the last 100, 150 years that these sports have had their rules written down. And professionalism and all that, and baseball and discuss all the sports, and had professional leagues in place have only been about the last 100 or 150 years. That what we call now modern professional sport has really been in existence. And then we can discuss getting rid of upper salary caps with football, association football, with Jimmy Hill in the 60s, and looking at the growth of the expansion era of the NHL in 67, the World Cup being thought of in the 30s, and the European teams not wanting to take part until later on in the 50s, our post-war. And then you can look at the Rugby Union World Cup taking until the 80s to be organised. World Cups, actually, ironically, are a more modern thing. Even with the ease of travel, with cruise liners in the 1900s, actually, World Cups have only been a thing, really, since, I'm going to say the 50s. Because the Football World Cup pre-war, no one knew what was going to happen with World War II. And when that all happened, They only had 2 World Cups under their belt. They weren't sure if they were going to go back and do it again. Rugby League World Cup is not as modern, not as old as you think either. Oh yeah, sports being organised. I mean, the jousting and the knights tournaments, they were technically professionals. They were getting paid money. Professional men at arms would fight in the sword and shield competition. Armored fighting league, the modern armored fighting leagues in Russia and America and Europe, they're based on what would the old tournaments, medieval tournaments of the 1200s and 1300s and 1400s, with jousting and the longsword and archery competitions. That kind of organized fighting kind of things goes back centuries. Gladiatorial combat, for example, in the Roman era. The ancient Olympics, there were mortal combat like pancration and wrestling. Oh yeah, boxing. Oh yeah, the organized sport goes back 5,000 years, be it professional, amateur, or slaves fighting or doing their master's bidding. It does go back a long time. Gambling, they found evidence in ancient Babylonia of gambling. So some of these things that we see as more modern, like what we class as modern sport or modern gambling, they had their origins thousands of years ago. But what we call as sport now, the modern era, is the last 150 years. And then there's different eras of those sports. So I can look at the history of rugby league, rugby union, association football. So soccer, yes, for those North Americans and Australians who can't cope with football because they have their own codes. I'm being a bit harsh, they're a bit tongue-in-cheek, because you've got the NFL in the US and the CFL in Canada, American football. You've got Aussie rules football, the AFL in Australia. So yeah, there are other codes. I've done a video on the 7 codes. There's 7, yes, there is 7. But yeah, there's multiple. You've got the Gaelic. You've got Gaelic football. You've got, and all the Gaelic sports are all amateur still. Hurling, they're still amateur. I think they should go professional at some point and modernise, absolutely. But the governing bodies don't want to at this point. The Gaelic Amateur Association, that's the GAA. They cover hurling and Gaelic football. They don't want to go professional at this time. They will eventually. They have to survive. But at this point in time, they're pretty much professional in all but name. Yeah, there's some weird professional sports out there. There's some weird, there are some strange sports. I mean, the national sport of Argentina is polo. It's not football. It's not rugby. It's polo. There you go. There's a thing for you. Brazilian jiu-jitsu is actually is more popular than people think in Brazil. They think football is the main sport. There are other sports in Brazil that are played at professional level. They say baseball. Is it the American pastime, or is it American football? So some countries don't really have a national sport. Others do. But we have multiple national sports here where we have top quality international and national club level teams. Cricket, football, rugby league and rugby union. They're our main 4 sports. Ice hockey is growing in popularity again. And then you have the individual sports like boxing and martial arts, snooker, darts, pool. And they have you don't have to be have to do much to become a pretty decent pool or snooker player, really. But yeah, there are some very weird traditional sports in towns and villages across the world. Jiu-jitsu. There are different forms of jiu-jitsu. You've got Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which has also got some parkour involved in it and some other martial art mixed into it. I've got a friend who did Brazilian jiu-jitsu for a while, who's actually Portuguese. And he lived in Rio for a while and Sao Paulo, and he also lived in Boston in the US, Boston. And he's from Madeira, and he's from the same town as Ronaldo, Cristiano. He went to school with his sister, and he goes, the whole family is not actually as popular as you think, which is really surprising. But no, I could look at a whole variety of histories of sports and leagues. I could do a bit more the history of the AFL, for example, or the history of the RFL, Super League, rugby league in general, the history of rugby league in general, the history of rugby league in Australia, for example, England. Looking at club histories a bit more. I need to do a bit more club history, I think. I've not done that for a while, but there are some things that really do interest me about sport, especially the history side of it. People tend to forget like the history of the clubs they support. Manchester City went like over, I think, 36 years without a trophy or something before they won their first trophy under the Sheikh Mansour era. They went from the 70s to, I think, 2011. I think it was 76 or something. They went a long time without winning anything. I mean, Blackburn Rovers are the first team to win the FA Cup 5 times. People forget that because they haven't won the trophy since the 20s. And they haven't won a trophy since 2002. And I'm a Blackburn fan. A lot of Blackburn fans don't realise we've won more than just the Premier League and the League Cup. We've won the FA Cup a hell of a lot. One of the most successful teams in FA Cup history in the early days, with the second most successful manager in FA Cup history as well. But because it's before their lifetime, they don't care. If it's not in colour TV, people don't care. People forget that Manchester United didn't win the league from 1967 until 1990 or something under Sir Alex Ferguson. They went like 25 years without a league trophy. They won the FA Cup a few times, but they went a long period of time where they were in Division 2, the old Division 2. Man United fans seem to have forgotten that. And Manchester City were as low as the 3rd tier at one point when they were playing at Main Road with Sean Goater up front, who saved them from relegation to what is now League 2. Yeah, people tend to forget that Nottingham Forest are the first team to win the European Cup to end up in the 3rd tier of their domestic competition. Yep. There are some really quirky things in club histories that fans now, the average fan now, doesn't realise. With the modern TV era, they just don't realise. People didn't realise that. A lot of people don't realise that Swindon Town and Oldham Athletic were founders of the Premier League. They're like, what? Yeah. The West Wales Raiders. Oh, yeah, Welsh Rugby League is a mess. I'm going to have to look at the Rochdale Hornets and the West Wales Raiders because they are some really, really shocking seasons. But the Rochdale Hornets probably has a much more history to it when it comes to rugby league than the West Wales Raiders, because they sound like a team that's just been made up out of thin air because the Welsh Crusaders were a thing. I'm going to look at the Rochdale Hornets just because they actually managed to win a game or two. Oh no, Notts County Nottingham Forest have actually played in the 3rd tier, not the 2nd, 3rd tier. Villa have never been in the 3rd tier. Nottingham Forest have. So I'm just going to put that one out there. Nottingham Forest have actually been to what is now League One. Aston Villa have never been in what is now League One historically. Just putting that out there. Luton Town have been in the conference. A team have been in the top division. There are some really interesting tales about football, and Manchester United, formerly Newton Heath, founders of the Football League, they have spent a fair period of their time not in the top division. There are very few clubs that have spent. I think Liverpool and Everton have spent their entire existence. They've never been relegated. They're not founders of the Football League, but they're older clubs that when there were not many clubs around, that they were just invited into the league to buff it out. Liverpool and Everton have never been relegated from the top division since they've been in the top division. That is something that you should know. And Liverpool's first home ground, Anfield, was actually Everton's original home ground before they moved to Goodison Park. Everton are an older club than Liverpool, and Everton sold Anfield to Liverpool for, I think, a couple of quid. In real terms, it's a few £1,000s, but they were like, we're building a new stadium at Goodison Park across Stanley Park. You can have our old stadium. We'll sell it to below market value because you need a place to play, and we're going to help you out. And so that's why Liverpool play at Anfield. A lot of Liverpool fans don't realise that. A lot of Everton fans don't realise that either, that Anfield was their old home stadium. Another funny one is the reason why Juventus, Udinese, and a few other clubs play in black and white stripes is Notts County. Notts County's owner was quite a wealthy industrialist, and he had lots of friends who wanted to set up football clubs not only in England but around the world. And so the reason why a lot of teams play in black and white stripes is because of Notts County giving out their old kit from the season before to this guy's friends. So Juventus, they were set up in the early 1900s, or the late. I don't believe Liverpool have. If they have, then Liverpool are the most successful team in top flight history. they have the most points acquired. Everton originally did play at Anfield, and they sold Liverpool Anfield for a couple of quid in Victorian times, and then in real terms, that's about £10,000 or something. And they moved to Goodison. So Liverpool's home ground originally belonged to Everton, and a lot of Liverpool fans would rather you didn't know that. Aston Villa, yeah, Aston Villa have been relegated. I know that. But Aston Villa were relegated in the 80s as well from the old Division 1. They were relegated in the 80s. They spent some time in the old Division 1 for a couple of seasons before Division 2 before coming back up to the old Division 1 before the Premiership. They've spent some time in the old Division 1 in the old days as well, in analog TV days. Aston Villa have spent a few seasons outside the top flight before the Premier League era. I'm trying to think of some other clubs that have spent that you wouldn't have realised have spent time in the lower divisions. There's quite a few actually. Liverpool, Everton, Manchester United spent a fair few seasons in the old Division 2. Notts County are, I think, the latest founder of the Football League to go out the Football League. Founders of the Football League playing their first season ever outside the Football League in their entire existence. Their entire existence, apart from this season, has been in the Football League. And yes, they do have the oldest ground. The county ground is the oldest ground currently used, as in being on the same site. They have had other grounds, have Notts County, but the county ground as it currently is the oldest football stadium in current consistent use. Yes. Ewood Park, however, is not Blackburn's original stadium, but it is one of the oldest grounds in continuous use. And it's, I think, one of the oldest grounds in the Football League. I think Turf Moor is another one. That's an old ground. Bramall Lane and Hillsborough are also pretty old grounds as well. Arsenal have spent some time outside the top flight in their existence, and they were originally the Woolwich Arsenal, and then they moved to Highbury. So they haven't always played in North London. They have spent some time in East London as well. God, there's some random crap on Facebook today. No, I mean, there are some of the random knowledge that I have of sport is weird. The South Sydney Rabbitohs being thrown out the NRL and then winning their appeal to get back in. Hamburg getting relegated out the Bundesliga, even though they were founders. And St. Pauli being their rivals, who've had a weaker history, yes. Borussia Mönchengladbach, they were a very successful team in the 70s in German football. They got relegated out the Bundesliga. Stuttgart have been relegated out the Bundesliga by Leverkusen, Kaiserslautern. I think Dortmund been out the Bundesliga before. I think Bayern Munich have been thrown out the Bundesliga. I think all the Bundesliga clubs, not one of them has spent their entire existence in the Bundesliga. Just putting that out there. I'm trying to think of Monaco have been relegated out of League One. I think PSG have been relegated out of League One as well in France. So PSG, even though they've got the money, they haven't spent every season in League One in their existence, and they're a pretty recent club. They're only formed in the 70s. PSG. PSG aren't as historical as some of the other football clubs in Europe. They are a newer existence. And they're not actually the most. They are now the most successful club in French football league history, but they're not as old as you think. They are a lot newer, and they used to have a rugby league team as well in the 90s. PSG, their owner decided to, I'm going to have a rugby league team in the Super League, and it didn't go very well. They didn't last very long. They weren't very good, because money doesn't always buy you success. I think Hamburg is the last Bundesliga team to get relegated. Now they've been relegated, so no Bundesliga team has spent their entire existence in Germany's top flight. Yes, it is. Bramall Lane has held a test match. I think a rugby league test match, if I'm not mistaken. Hillsborough and Villa Park have held FA Cup semi-finals on and off for donkey's years until recently. I think, what else? Nothing to say about the Arsenal. They took the Spurs, white sleeves. Yep. Do you know why the term Gooner comes from as well? Now, in the 60s, I think 1963, I think, is a Tottenham-Arsenal game. And a Spurs hooligan was referring to the Arsenal firm as a bunch of gooners, as a play on the Gunners. And the Arsenal firm went, "We like that, you yid. We'll keep that." And yes, Spurs were actually once a very successful team, and they haven't won a trophy for a very, very long time. And I think they've peaked under the current current regime under Pochettino. And I don't think Mourinho is going to get the best out of this team. And with Harry Kane being injured and Dele Alli being a moody, overrated player, I think Spurs are in some trouble. I think Spurs are going to start declining. And that new stadium with no trophies to fill that cabinet with, that's a nice little investment there, because now they're reliant on the NFL paying off their debt. Yes, I think Spurs have shot their bolt. And we could see Spurs doing a Man United or an Arsenal and being very unsuccessful for a long period of time. And whether we'll see what happens with Spurs and Arsenal and Man United, but I think their days of being the dominant teams are long gone. And will they slip down to the Championship? Because all those teams have all been in the second tier. Oh yeah, look, Spurs and Arsenal fans are a special breed. I know a fair few of them. Fans of North London, they are touched, very touched. And their rivalry is really pathetic, actually, to be fair, because the amount of racism at their games is ironic, considering that the background of the fan base of both clubs is a mixed bag of ethnicities and cultures and religions. Yet the racism at Tottenham and Arsenal games is unreal. I cannot believe how vile the fan bases actually are, but that's my personal opinion. And I think the rivalry is more toxic than it needs to be. I think this is the problem with having so many top flight or big professional clubs in London. So many Football League clubs in London and the Premiership in London. It's unreal. It really does divide communities around London. It really does. Millwall have been warned again about racist chanting over the tannoy. No surprise there at the weekend. I'm not doing a video on it because why would I give these bastards airtime by giving a special video on the racism at Millwall? It just gives them more airtime, and I don't want to do that. Just not doing it. I'm not gonna really give them the airtime time of day. Just not happening. It's just not happening. I think. But yeah, the word Gooner comes from the Tottenham firm in the, I think, 1963 league clash at White Hart Lane. I believe, possibly Highbury. But yeah, the Arsenal firm went, we like that, we'll keep that, and then they've kept it ever since. And it's just what it is. And ironically, more Jewish people support Arsenal than Tottenham as well. That's something else. That's a little tidbit. And more people in Manchester supported Bury than Manchester United until Bury's collapse. There were more registered Bury fans who are season ticket holders of Bury and Bolton Wanderers combined than Manchester United fans from the Greater Manchester area. Most Man United fans don't live in Manchester. Just putting that out there as well. I think they're more Stockport County fans than Manchester United fans living in Manchester. It's a historical fact. I could tell you the four clubs that play in Claret and Blue: Scunthorpe United, West Ham, Burnley, and Aston Villa. Two are founders of the Football League. Two are later additions. So West Ham and Scunthorpe United were formed in the 1900s. Or 1920s at least, and Aston Villa and and Burnley took turns with the away kit, home kit. They both had the same kit, and they would take turns with who would wear the white jersey and who would wear and that's where the home away kit idea comes from. Is Aston Villa and Burnley had exactly the same kit, so they had to work out when they played each other. That's where the different coloured white jersey for the away kit comes from. That's the idea of an away kit. Is Burnley, Aston Villa, both founders of the Football League, both playing Claret and Blue. And they both have matching jerseys, so they had to come up with the away kit. That's where the away kit comes from. Back in the founding of the Football League was 1878, and Burnley and Aston Villa both had matching kits, and they had to, when they played each other in the Football League, they had to figure out who was the away team, and that's where they came up with the away kit idea. That's an interesting fact. Newton Heath, or Manchester United as we now know them, their original colours were green and yellow. Hideous kit, and they came back in their centenary year with the 125 years of existence or whatever it was, with that green and yellow away kit in 1996, which was grim. And when the Glazers took over, Man United fans in protest set up FC United of Manchester and also brought back the green and yellow. I'm a Blackburn fan. I don't like Burnley. They're Dingles. Burnley Dingles. Oh, they're close to Barnsley. Oh, but I'm part of Lancashire. Yeah, I have actually stated on this channel that when I hit 2,000 subscribers or 1,000, whichever is attainable, so either monetization, which is 1,000 or 2,000, I will buy and wear a Burnley shirt and smile while I'm doing it, whilst burning my eyes with bleach. Obviously, my granddad's a Burnley fan, so. Every third world country picture has got an Arsenal strip on. Oh, yeah. So Leeds played in yellow for ages before copying Real Madrid. Leeds away kit is still yellow, and their badge still has yellow on it. But the White Rose of Yorkshire, and Leeds being one of the major metropolitan areas in Yorkshire, they went with the white kit quite some time ago. I think you'll find quite a long time ago. It wasn't a recent thing. But Leeds, interesting club to look at, because they were very successful and they nearly won the Champions League not long before they got relegated from the Premier League. But their mismanagement off the field is why they are where they are in the Championship. It's not because of the players they had or the managers they had or the team they could put on the field, which in the late 90s, early 2000s was a really good team. It quite literally was the off-field management being diabolical. And this is where I think sports governance, and this is something that I started the live stream on with the Saracens, sports governance needs to be more transparent, and club auditing needs to be open books. And sport doesn't want to do that because of the amount of money in sport. And I think we're reaching a point where fans of sport, doesn't matter what sport it is, are losing faith in the people that govern the sport and where the money comes from and the money side of it and the greed. They're losing. Sport is losing touch with its roots, and that's a problem. When you got a Championship player on 50, 60 grand a week, which is near enough Premier League average, that's a problem. That is a problem, because so many clubs, as we've seen in not only the Premier League, well, actually in the Premier League as well, in the Premier League era, have had financial problems. Portsmouth is a prime example. There were players at Portsmouth when they dropped down the divisions rapidly who were still on 100 and something K a week or 50. There were players playing in League Two with Portsmouth who were on Premier League wages because of their contracts. This is where the player agent has got far too much power, and the lack of transparency in how players are signed and transfers and agents' fees and where the money comes from and goes is really concerning, because we're seeing so many clubs right now backs against the wall, broke. And that goes from the non-league through to the Premiership. There are Premiership clubs who are riddled with debt that if the owners were to pull the plug and it's a standalone company, the clubs are bust. Chelsea and Man United would be out of business if Abramovich and the Glazers walked away from them. If the Glazers and Abramovich walked away from Man United and Chelsea, those clubs have had it. Ironically, Newcastle United could survive without Mike Ashley. That is a club that always turns a profit. Ironically, even though he's mismanaged that club terribly and has halved the value of the club, when he bought the club a few seasons before, it was the second wealthiest club in England. It was the 10th wealthiest club in Europe. It was one of the richest clubs in the world. It was valued at nearly 700 million in real terms, 600 and something with the training grounds and all the other facilities, properties that Newcastle owns, anywhere between 600 and 700 million. It is now worth less than 300, and he wants about 75 million more than actual valuation. He has devalued the club under his ownership. It's halved in value. And there you go. That's something that Mike Ashley's done. But the club will always turn a profit. He's just taken the money out of the club and devalued the value of it. But Newcastle United is one of the few clubs that will always sell out and make a profit. Regardless of how shit the team is, fans will go. Fans will go to Newcastle United. They've not won a trophy since the 50s. They still turn up at Newcastle United regardless of where the team is in the league or what league they're in. That is the loyalty of the fan base. They're too loyal for their own good. And that's where the ownership can get away with what they want. Fans will turn up and pay for crap. And when someone asked me earlier about the Maple Leafs being the Barcelona of ice hockey, the Maple Leafs have been shit for 53 years. Fans will still go to Maple Leaf Garden, or what is now Air Canada Centre, I believe, or Rogers Arena. I can't remember what the main sponsor of the arena is now. They will still go and watch garbage. The team is a lot better now than what it was, and they are a playoff team. They can't win a playoff round, but they are a better team than what they were 5 to 6 years ago. But Maple Leafs fans will turn up and watch garbage. The ownership know this. The ownership know they can get away with having a crap team on the ice because fans persistently turn up and they make money. The Maple Leafs will always turn a profit. regardless if the team is the worst team in the NHL, the Maple Leafs make a profit. Newcastle United, doesn't matter if they get relegated to the Premier League, they're going to make money. It doesn't matter if they're in League Two, they would make money because fans will turn up week in, week out and pay for crap. They will pay for crap. They are too loyal. Yet they complain about bad management. Well, stay away. If they voted with their feet and their wallets and stopped buying tickets, you might see action against Mike Ashley take effect. I think the biggest club in Yorkshire, Leeds, Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday. Bradford City are underrated as a club. Don't forget Bradford City are a big urban area, big fan base, being a Premier League club as well. Not doing so well now these days. But Bradford City, don't forget them. Bradford Park Avenue as well. Historical winners of the FA Cup multiple times as well. I think the second club to win the FA Cup 5 times is Bradford Park Avenue. And one of the first winners of the FA Cup as well. There are a lot of teams in Yorkshire that get overlooked. I think Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday, Leeds, and I'm going to put Bradford City are the 4 big clubs for fan base. For success and history, I think Sheffield Wednesday are the most successful club out of the 4 for trophies won and years in the top flight. Hull is now Humberside, but it's technically in Yorkshire, but they're nowhere near as successful as the rest. All the others have won trophies. Hull, I don't think have ever actually won a trophy. They've been in an FA Cup final, never won a trophy. An actual league trophy of the top division or a League Cup or an FA Cup, they never won one. But they always, well, you could say that, but they were back in the top flight before he bought the club. So debatable. Had the Premier League not been in existence, football may have been different. Had it been the old Division 1 and not the Premier League, and there had been a division between the Football League clubs and the FA, and the breakdown in communication that we've had, which we're seeing happening again, with a distrust between the Football League clubs, the Football League and the FA, there is a breakdown in trust. And that's what was happening 30 years ago. Towards the end of the 80s, there was a definite breakdown in trust and how the money was getting distributed and how the game was being governed. There was a breakdown in trust and there was a breakaway. The biggest clubs in the country broke away. And they came to an agreement where the Premier League would still be part of the Football League structure but wouldn't be governed by the EFL, and the FA would sanction it, and there would still be promotion relegation, and that's what we've ended up with, what is now League One, League Two, the Championship, and all that. But the breakdown in trust between the clubs, the fans really lost trust in the FA and the Football League. The governing bodies were failing. The clubs were not happy with how the game was being run and how money was being distributed. And fans in general were pissed off. Crowd numbers were dropping in the 70s, and certain clubs were really buggered financially. And yeah. And Man City approved money doesn't always buy you trophies. It took them a long time to win their first bit of silverware. And I don't think Guardiola is going to be there much longer. I really think Guardiola, unless they win the Champions League, he's going to go. He will. Him signing that nice contract extension is on winning the Champions League, and they're not even close. Man City aren't even close to winning the Champions League. But you look at the state of football and the history of it. The Premier League era hasn't necessarily been the golden roses and sunlit uplands that people expect it is. It's not as pleasant, and it hasn't benefited all the clubs. Very few clubs have actually benefited from the Premier League. A lot of clubs have run themselves into the ground trying to get the Premier League. When they get the Premier League, they get relegated. It hasn't necessarily benefited clubs as much as you think. Ask Ipswich and Bradford City fans about their 2 seasons in the Premier League. Bradford City was basically bankrupt when they got relegated. Ipswich haven't been close to getting back. I'm just going to put that out there. Ask Portsmouth fans, where's all that money gone from that FA Cup triumph from their Premier League years? Where's all the money gone? Coventry City, where's the money gone? You've got to ask questions about a lot of clubs that were in the Premier League that are now not in the Premier League, that are in the lower divisions. Where has that money gone? How has it benefited? Yeah, and how is it? Oh, yeah, it's only benefited a certain handful of clubs, and all of them have foreign ownership. None of the top 6 right now are owned by an Englishman. It's maybe the English Premier League. Foreign ownership is sucking the joy out of the game. It's too corporate. I understand you've got to make money and you've got to have a decent business model, but where's the fans saying who owns the club? like the European models, where the fans have a big say on ownership and who's on the board and the direction the club takes and the ticket price. We don't have that. We have unscrupulous billionaires, be it British or foreign, who just use it as a cash cow, either to make money or as a tax dodge, to say, I've lost loads of money this year. Can I have a tax rebate from whatever government? So a lot of the owners are using it as a tax dodge to say, I'm losing money. I've got to prop up one of my businesses, which is insert name of football club, limited. I can't afford to go to a game anymore. I haven't been to a football league game. I mean, I live right by Maidenhead United, and the conference still can't afford to go. I just cannot afford to go to a game. The cost of football is not taken into consideration, and fans have basically said enough's enough. And it's getting to the point where, look at the empty seats in the FA Cup, just gone in those games. The amount of 160,000 fans stayed away that were there last year, or numbers of. And last year's numbers were down on the year before in the third round, and the numbers are dropping. Just putting that out there. The numbers in the FA Cup third round are dropping year on year. And that's normally the round that everyone wants to watch, because it's when the little clubs play the big clubs. And the big clubs from the top two leagues are on the scene. And numbers are down. Numbers are down massively. I worry about what the fourth round is going to look like, and then the fifth round, and then when we get to the quarterfinals, semi-finals, and final, what the actual numbers are going to look like. The League Cup has been having low attendances for years, and Oh, look, my mate is a Leeds fan, and we were discussing season tickets, and even a season ticket for Leeds right now was contingent on them getting promoted to the Premier League, and it's still too much. Still too much. It's not right. And you missed Wolves out from there as well. I think Wolves have a very, I think, from that list. I'm going to do a list of English teams and the amount of trophies they've won, be it league titles, FA Cups, League Cups, and European trophies, and you'll be surprised who makes the top 10. The top 10 most successful teams in English football history for number of trophies. I'm not going to do league titles or FA Cups or League Cups, just number of trophies in total that those clubs have won in their existence. And you'll be surprised what the top 10 looks like. Really surprised. You'll be stunned by how few clubs have actually won trophies in English football. And I'm going to do all trophies. That's including European trophies, as well as League Cup, FA Cup, and league titles. So that's the top division. All trophies together, the numbers that clubs have won. And you'll be stunned at how few clubs have actually got silverware. Even if it's just the one trophy or the two trophies in their existence, you'll be surprised how few clubs have actually won silverware in their existence. That'll be a fun list to do. I like the list videos. But I'm going to give that, been going 2 hours and 45 minutes. I've got to go buy some bits and pieces and cook me dinner. And then I've got to go see some friends. I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for watching. Really enjoyed all your comments. Lots of interesting comments and discussion points. A lot of people from all over the world have watched, from North America through to Australia and New Zealand. So really enjoyed that. Obviously, we've ended up discussing football and then the history of sport. I think history of sport is more interesting than sport currently. I like the history of sport a lot more now and researching it than some of the current sporting events. The Saracens situation, what effect will that have on England and the Test side under Eddie Jones? We're going to find out over the next couple of months when the club is relegated, when they're actually in the Championship next season, how many of that core of players who are England players stay with the club or find employment elsewhere, and how that then affects their selection prospects. Are they playing in England or playing abroad? That's going to be interesting. But for now, I've got to do some video research on the Rochdale Hornets, who are possibly the worst rugby league team I think I've ever heard of with their record, although the West Wales, whatever they are, were pretty bad as well. Got to do some history videos on some shocking seasons. And I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon. Thank you very much for your questions, and goodbye for now.